This funny and interesting story takes place in the Kingdom of the Swordsmen, in the eastern wasteland, where an attack on the city took place. One of the attackers pushed the students back and said that their clan could do nothing against this phantom transformation. Times had changed, and now these lands would belong to their blood clan. The wounded students shouted for the villain to stop talking nonsense, because he had already told Brother Alan, and when he came, none of them would leave. The 5 terrifying masters stood above the disciples, and one of them said that he did not know anyone among the top disciples of the Sword Clan with such a name. Apparently, he's not even in the top 10, and if he dares to fight the Great 5 of the Blood Clan, he's finished. The man with the terrifying scarlet aura said that he should come here and collect the corpses of the students. After these words, the huge red projection that the villain summoned struck the student with its fist. Suddenly, the unknown guy rushed towards the threat with the speed of a cheetah. The scarlet fist was immediately blocked by his skills. The unknown villain in the hat was surprised that someone was able to block his attack. 2 disciples who were preparing for death rejoiced that they were saved, and the third of them shouted that it was Brother Alan. Brother Alan, a long-haired man with blue eyes and a powerful aura of chi that instilled calm, was glad that he had made it in time. The villain laughed when he saw that same unknown sword fighter. He asked if the guy was looking for death, and his projection began to create a powerful scarlet sphere to attack. But Alan, with one light blow of his sword, immediately struck the monster down and stopped all his attempts to hit the enemy. In an instant, the entire Great 5 of the Blood Clan received colossal injuries and were routed. A few moments later, they were all lying unconscious at Alan's feet. Apparently it was all over for them. Unnoticed by the others, a strange scarlet sphere began to roll from one of the 5 masters. Alan asked the students if everything was okay, and they thanked him for his help. Alan asked Brother Steve if he had told him not to do anything, because if he hadn't done it in time, they would have died, to which Steve replied that it would be a lesson for him, but these masters had sacrificed 1,000 monks just to perfect the Blood Soul Pearl, and so he couldn't sit idly by. Alan advised the boy not to listen to the clan's fairy tales. Let him do what he can and live a normal life. This is the best path to improvement for his generation. Suddenly, the student noticed how the Scarlet Pearl began to emit purple, ominous smoke and headed towards Alan. An elder of the Blood Clan appeared from it, who asked who dared to speak out against his students. He then tried to attack our hero with a fist of phantom comprehension. Steve recognized him and shouted that he was the 7th level master of the Purple Palace. But Alan was already preparing for a new battle, drawing his invincible sword from its sheath. The blade of the sword glowed with blue light, and immediately multiple cuts of the sword rushed towards the master. Alan's power was able to stop the elder's ghostly hand. The master was surprised that someone was actually able to stop his attack. He thought for a moment and said that Alan was a good fighter, and it would be a shame to even kill someone like him. The villain offered Alan to join them because their clan always respected the strong. He would make him his #1 student and support the guy. Besides, their clan was full of treasures and beauties. Alan replied to the elder that he had heard that they worked from early morning until late at night, eating and sleeping in the open air while being constantly hunted. On their path to perfection, they kill each other because they only care about their own gain, to which the master replied that they don't have many rules and their discipline is lame, but their main principle is that the more you work, the more you get. Alan laughed at the phrase, "the more you work, the more you get." They have regulated working hours at the swordsman's school, and besides, he has been here for a long time and sincerely enjoys the time he spends here. That's why he will never join them. After these words, the guy used his sword technique, which cuts everything in its path. The master tried to hold back such a powerful attack, but he had difficulty doing so. Ultimately, Alan's sword technique won out, and a huge explosion was heard, signifying the swordsman's victory. Steve was happy about the guy's victory and asked if he did the right thing by calling him here for help. The other students couldn't believe their eyes. It was impossible for their clan's basic sword skills to be so powerful. The cut-up demon, who lay without strength, asked Alan why he did not want to join them. The guy replied that he had worked hard for many years, so he knew in advance what he would tell him. The master dared to pull the wool over his eyes and thereby doomed himself to this humiliation. Suddenly, a strange sphere rose from the master's body, emitting a purple, ominous aura. The sphere flew up to Alan's hands and whispered in a quiet voice for the guy to finish off the elder. Then the strange artifact flew away at the speed of sound. Alan didn't understand what had happened, but assumed that the master's spirit had left the body and was trying to escape. He readied his energy-charged sword and was ready to set out on a soul hunt. However, suddenly the guy heard the annoying sound of an alarm clock. The hero stopped, took his watch out of his cloak, and began to look at it. After this, to the surprise of the other students, he turned around and said that the main mission was completed and he was leaving. One of the disciples couldn't believe that Brother Alan would just let the soul of an elder of such a powerful clan escape. Suddenly, Steve started telling other students about Alan that there was something they didn't understand. The thing is, Brother Alan practices the 9-to-5 method. He pointed to the sun setting behind the mountain, which meant that time was up. This means that Alan is now at the end of his working day. What irritated Alan most was that at the end of the workday, he still had a ton of work left, and he was practically forced to work overtime. The next day, we are transported to the residence of the Swordsman clan. Here, warriors train to control their blades, which they can use to fly if they concentrate enough chakra. In order to be strong, they train hard day after day. But not all of them are such hard workers. One of the students turned around and looked at the one who was again being lazy and doing nothing. He didn't understand how the elders even accepted a disciple like this guy. It was Alan, who was sleeping peacefully under a tree, while others were training tirelessly. The noise of the warriors woke the boy, and he reluctantly began to stretch and wake up. He took off his blindfold to look at his comrades. Alan returned after midnight, so he didn't get much sleep. If he had known about everything in advance, he would not have become the one who takes on such troublesome tasks. Up until that point, he had been working overtime 9/9/6 continuously for 5 years. The 996 work schedule is an unofficial work schedule from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. His boss yelled at the guy from morning until night that he was lazy and that he should continue working until he finished and not even think about leaving. The guy ended up losing consciousness, and his colleagues told his boss to call an ambulance, but he said that he should let the guy finish the project first. Suddenly, Alan died and accidentally ended up in this fantasy world. Here, he is a simple student of a clan of swordsmen, and finally, he has a second chance to change everything. But the other students, just like in his past life, tell him to work hard and not stop for sleep, because a student of his age should devote himself to practice, not sleep. Everyone around the guy tells him that he is lazy, and they have never seen such a lazy person. But he decided that in order not to repeat the mistakes of the past, he would never work overtime in this world. But the guy didn't expect that even here he would stand out so much. Suddenly, someone distracted him from his memories by calling his name. It was Steve who told Alan that the elder was looking for him and wanted to ask him about the details of yesterday's mission. Alan asked if Steve had said anything about him, and the enthusiastic student replied that the master had already called them for a conversation, but no one had said a word about Alan's power. The eternal lazybones replied that this was very good, and next time the guy would teach Steve a couple of tricks. The student immediately blushed and thanked his brother in arms. Alan used his magic sword and headed towards the elder's palace. After some time, he arrived at the main hall. In this world, improvement is divided into 6 stages, from the lowest to the highest in order: improvement of the chakra, the realm of the spirit. Then the formation of the soul is the limit of the palace of immortals, sealing its power. And the last stages are called the purple palace, and then the ascent to the truth. Each of these stages is divided into 9 levels. But there is someone more serious than all these stages. This is the head of the Swordsman clan, Reynold, 6th level of ascension to truth. The strongest of this world are called his god of the sword of the elements. Alan waved to Reynold and wished the elder good morning. The mighty warrior looked at the boy with a merciless gaze and told him not to forget where he was. At that moment, Alan took a box out of his pocket and said that this was tea that he had planted and that it had ripened a couple of days ago. This information boggled Reynolds' mind. He immediately approached Alan like a child and began to beg him to let him try his new tea. Who would have thought that the god of the sword of the elements, Reynold, is madly in love with tea? Alan used his old knowledge of growing succulents and other plants to develop a superior variety of tea, which helped him build a good relationship with the elder, but this is a must for any self-respecting employee. His thoughts were interrupted by an elder who was hiding tea in his sleeve. He asked how yesterday's mission went. Some students said that it was Alan who saved them. The guy looked away and replied that it happened completely by accident. He then took out a strange sphere and said that he took it from one of the disciples of another clan. Reynold immediately realized what this sphere was. It was a blood pearl. He took it from his student and asked if Alan knew what kind of artifact it was and what power it possessed. Reynold looked at the guy with a serious look and began his story. But Alan immediately waved it off and started shouting that he didn't know anything and didn't want to hear anything and that he wasn't interested in any of this. He tried to run away, saying that if he had nothing more to say to his master, then he would go about his business. Alan wanted to spend this life carefree, so let the elder leave these worries to someone else, but the master ordered him to stop. Reynolds shouted that Alan should listen when the elder spoke, and even though the boy had succeeded in growing tea, as a true disciple he could not be so passive. The master wanted to know why the boy had not taken part in the sword training last week. Alan replied that he would then have to wait an hour until it was his turn, and the master should know that Alan has his own principles in training, so he needs to be understood. Reynolds objected, shouting that because he missed class, all the masters came to him to complain. And they all unanimously asked to demote Alan from the ranks of the students. The guy calmly turned around and asked if they really said that. Reynolds thought he had been too harsh with him and should have said it more carefully. However, Alan was only glad to hear these words, because if he was demoted to an inner disciple, no one would bother him anymore. Alan asked the elder when he would demote him, and Reynolds' patience was already reaching its limit. And then he exploded and shouted that in the entire history of the clan, there had not been a single such precedent. If Alan was demoted, it would be tantamount to a slap in the face to his elder. The guy replied that he had no idea that something so wonderful would happen. Suddenly, someone behind the guy called his name, and Reynolds was glad that she had finally arrived. The girl went to Alan and said that tens of thousands of students work day and night to become true students. But for some reason, only brother Alan is willing to give up this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This beauty's name was Hannah, and she was the true #1 disciple of the Swordsman clan. She achieved great success in cultivation in her early years, and has since ranked first among the disciples. She was called the future of the Swordsman clan, and she was also very beautiful. Meanwhile, Alan is ranked 55th, which is the clan's last place. The guy said that his sister doesn't know, but he's been stuck at the Purple Palace for a long time. So Alan decided to start all over again as an inner disciple. Reinforce your spirit, break through the limits of the Palace of Immortality, and become stronger, because the one who repeats everything 10,000 times becomes the strongest. Hannah replied that she had never thought he would be so progressive and think so deeply about ways to improve himself. It was different from what she had heard about him. The girl leaned over and said that she was wrong, and meanwhile the master watched this performance that Alan put on. Reynolds interrupted their conversation and said that the reason the guy was here was because several masters wanted to ask him for a favor. Alan turned warily and asked what the masters wanted from him. They want him to go with Hannah on a mission and learn hard work from their best student. It was the worst thing Alan could imagine. He felt like the elder was making fun of him. It was Hannah, with her hyperactivity, who doomed the entire clan to live up to her standards. He and Alan were completely different people, and the guy thought that there was no way they could work together. Reynolds said that the girl is the best student and that people line up to ask her for advice every day, and the guy is also unhappy that he was given such a wonderful opportunity to study. Alan replied that he was simply worried that he was not good enough for this mission and would hinder his sister's improvement. He turned to the girl and with an unperturbed look asked her to confirm her words that she did not want the guy to interfere. Hannah, on the contrary, shouted at the guy not to worry about it. Her eyes lit up with enthusiasm, and she said that their entire clan was family and they should support each other and make progress together. Moreover, brother Alan can use this opportunity to prove himself and destroy the rumors that other people are spreading about him. Alana was overcome with fear. The boy thought that they were trying to scare him because he didn't want to suffer like her. Then he used another trick. The guy folded his hands in a sign of humility. He stood before the elder and said that if he took part in this mission, his tea leaves would be left without careful supervision. The elder even invited Hannah to join Alan on this mission, but he had no intention of backing down from his principles. He had no reason to go with her when he could just as well fool around here. Suddenly, the enraged master raised his hand and made a strange gesture. Reynolds said that if Alan successfully completed this task, he would give him 3 days off. 3 days off, these words echoed in the guy's head. A whole 3 days off? That was all one could dream of. Alan immediately grabbed the master's hand in gratitude. His eyes were shining with enthusiasm, and he asked the elder to immediately inform him of the content and location of the mission. He would go through fire, water, and copper pipes to complete it, and the master, meanwhile, would only sigh in disappointment. A quarter of a day later, Hannah was diligently training to master the techniques. Meanwhile, Alan was yawning after a deep sleep. He approached the girl who was training and said that she was training very hard. Meanwhile, Hannah was angry at the guy because he was late. Alan told her that if he didn't sleep at lunch, he wouldn't have any strength for the battle. The girl began to scold him, saying that he should devote more time to practice, but she, for example, came here on time and managed to make 3,000 swings of the sword. But it turns out that Alan needs sleep like a normal person. He is too weak. The guy said she was right, and he would think it over in his spare time, and then give it his all at the next training session with double effort. But in reality, all he was thinking about was Hannah grumbling like an old woman. The girl sighed in disappointment and said that they didn't have time for this, and it was time to move on. At that very second, our new team rushed to the mission site. While they were flying to the place, Hannah asked Alan what he thought about the mission, to which he replied that the Elder had sent them to investigate the disappearance of people in the mountains, and this mountain range was located right next to the sacrificed village. Alan suspected that the disappearance was not accidental at all. Hannah agreed with him. The inspired girl encouraged the guy, telling him not to worry, considering his level, she would protect him. Alan looked at her and thanked her happily. He didn't think that Hannah would be a person he could rely on. The guy thought he had hit the jackpot and would get a 3-day weekend and become friends with a beauty. Alan mentally thanked the Elder, and they set off on their mission. Later in the evening, the team reached the mountains where people disappear. The girl told her brother Alan that they needed to ask the locals first, while Alan was looking for something in his robe. Suddenly he took out his watch, opened it, and started looking at it, which surprised Hannah very much. The girl looked at him with a surprised look and did not understand why Alan was counting. When he counted to 0, he joyfully shouted that the time was up. He went to rest and shouted to Hannah that he was leaving everything to her, and tomorrow let her tell him everything. After some time, our hero reached the inn of the local village. The establishment was a bit empty. Alan went in and asked the owner to give him one room. The seemingly gloomy and tired man replied that it would cost 1 silver coin. Alan provided the currency, and the owner handed him the key to the room on the 2nd floor. When Alan took the key, he noticed a strange tattoo on the man's arm that looked like the tentacles of a black squid. Although this could have been a clue, Alan decided that it didn't matter because now was his time to rest. Once he reached his room, he lay down on his soft bed and thought about how Hannah was progressing with her investigation. After some time, the guy woke up because of a loud noise from below. The owner was telling someone that there were no vacancies, and some girl was shouting that there was clearly no one here, and the owner was acting rudely. The guy jumped out of bed and was unhappy that someone woke him up. But Alan had heard that screaming voice somewhere before. It was Hannah who offered 2 silver coins for the room, but the owner kept saying that there were no more vacancies. Suddenly, someone called the enraged girl by name. Hannah was delighted to see her brother Alan, who told her not to torment the owner, since he had already said that there were no vacancies. The boy approached the man and asked if his younger sister could spend the night in his room. The gloomy owner nodded, and Hannah was surprised by such a proposal. The girl couldn't believe that she would spend the night with him in the same room. She was overcome with panic. Alan walked up the stairs and told a stunned Hannah that if she didn't want to spend the night on the street, she should follow him. Hannah was embarrassed and had no choice but to follow the guy. Alan walked slowly, and the girl followed him like a very quiet mouse. She was worried and thought that they would not do anything that she would be ashamed of later. Besides, the girl is much stronger than him and can stand up for herself. A few minutes later, they came into the room where Alan was eating cookies, and Hannah was sitting quietly nearby. The guy asked the girl if she had had dinner. He handed her a plate of cookies and asked if she would like to eat something. To which Hannah replied that they must learn to abstain from food in order to harden their hearts. Only when your heart is strong can you... Before the girl could finish speaking, Alan put a cookie in her mouth. The guy wiped his hands from crumbs, and Hannah turned completely red. Having swallowed the food, she ascended, tasting the sweet, but not greasy pastry that melts in the mouth and has a slight floral taste. It penetrated the girl's heart, making her want to drown in it. At that very moment, her sanity returned. She started yelling at Alan, scolding him for sneaking up on her with that cake. The guy turned to the girl with an unperturbed look and asked if she had enjoyed the pastries, to which she replied that she had really enjoyed them. But there is no benefit from such food, so it is better not to eat much. But Alan did not agree with this statement. He asked his sister if she had ever wondered if it was possible to walk with 7-league strides while avoiding the 5 vegetables, 3 flowers, and worldly vanity. The 5 vegetables are the vegetables that Buddhist monks do not eat, and the 3 colors are the 3 colors of clouds, and Alan said that they should not be avoided. After all, they walk through this world, and even with all the desire, they can't shut themselves off from everything in the world. Blind avoidance will only tire you out physically and psychologically. You will be afraid of everything that will make practice difficult. The girl asked how they could practice without giving up human desires. It was impossible. Alan replied that he thought that true monks were not afraid to face temptation and experience it themselves. As with these cakes, if you're worried about their taste buds disturbing your mind, you might want to try getting used to them. When you learn to treat this as something completely ordinary and remain indifferent to it, this will be your first step towards real practice, and only with a pure heart will a girl be able to see the truth. Only in this case will she feel like a fish in water, free and natural. Lost in his thoughts, Alan opened his eyes to look at the girl. She was in shock, and the guy realized that he had said too much and that her brain had apparently overheated. Suddenly, the girl jumped up from her seat, shouting that she understood everything. Only by facing desire head-on and then renouncing it can she return to her true nature and know the essence of the world. After these words, Hannah began to eat all the sweets that were on the table with great enthusiasm. Alan was shocked. Now all his sweets would go to the girl, and not to him. A little later, offended by Hannah, he said that today she would have to sleep on the floor, to which the girl chuckled and replied that she would not sleep, but would simply sit and meditate. And so it happened. Alan fell asleep in a cozy bed, and Hannah sat and meditated in the room. Suddenly, a strange man approached the door to their room. The man took something out and said that he was ready to let this girl go. But now, unfortunately, he would have to finish her off, after which he placed a strange incense in front of their door. Hannah continued to meditate, and the smoke from the incense gradually began to fill the entire room. The girl opened her eyes slightly and found it strange that she smelled some kind of aroma. At that very moment, she realized that she was surrounded by a mysterious fog, which was penetrating more and more into their room. Hannah realized that this was a poison from which she could no longer escape. Suddenly, her body began to feel heavier, and her face became covered in sweat. A few moments later, the girl fell to the floor without strength. All she could do in her current state was whisper for Brother Alan to run away as quickly as possible. However, the guy was lying on the bed and there was a strange aura around him. It seemed that the guy was completely unaffected by the poison and was simply watching the girl. Hannah's vision gradually became cloudy, and eventually she closed her eyes and lost consciousness. Meanwhile, a secret meeting took place in the forest outside the village. The man told the master that the disciples of the Sword Clan were knocked down by him using the scent of broken spirit. One of the students is Hannah, the best student of the clan, and the identity of the second is unknown to him, but the girl called him Brother Alan. The unknown figure with red eyes said that he didn't expect such a weakling to defeat Hannah. As for this Alan, the gentleman has never heard of him. He must be someone insignificant. A dark figure appeared. It was a hooded man with a scar on his cheek who had bright, expressive red eyes. He said that his servant had done a great job this time. The innkeeper began to cry and ask about his wife and children. The gloomy stranger calmed the old man and told him not to worry because they were alive and well, and he would take him to them right now. The innkeeper was delighted by the gentleman's kindness and began to thank him. But at that very moment, lightning struck the old man's chest, killing him on the spot. The gloomy man in the hood laughed and shouted that this was the last victim and everything was about to end. Having finished laughing, he called the third and fourth, who immediately landed behind the man. He ordered them to go to the inn and capture the two disciples of the swordsman clan. Meanwhile, sweet Hannah began to gradually come to her senses and open her eyes. She was lying on the bed, and Alan was sitting next to her and waiting for the girl to wake up. Suddenly, Hannah stood up abruptly and started shouting that they needed to run away from here because it was dangerous here. Alan still sat there with an imperturbable expression and looked at the frightened girl. Her sanity gradually began to return, and she began to realize how ridiculous she now looked. She asked Alan why he was okay, since he should have lost consciousness before her. The guy replied that when he sleeps, unlike Hannah during meditation, he does not use spiritual power, so the aroma of a broken spirit did not affect him in any way. But Alan had to remain still for a long time for the scent to dissipate and for Hannah to come to her senses. In fact, it is difficult for monks below the 5th level of the Purple Palace to resist this poison. Alan told the girl that her social experience was too limited and that she should be more careful. If she had gone on the mission herself, the consequences would have been catastrophic. The girl bowed before Alan and thanked him for saving her, and in the future she vowed to be more careful. Meanwhile, the guy brewed some aromatic tea. He handed her the tea and told her to throw away politeness and drink the tea and warm up. Hannah was very embarrassed, feeling guilty about the incident, but thanked her brother Alan for the drink. Rumor has it that brother Alan is just an ordinary lazy person who doesn't know how to do anything and doesn't strive for anything. But Hannah never expected that he would not only say a few words to her, but also reveal the secrets of cultivation. All this time he was so attentive to everything, even saved her life, excellent character, pleasant appearance. It's a pity that his level is low. The girl immediately shuddered and caught herself thinking that she shouldn't think about such things. Alan, meanwhile, turned to her and asked how she felt. The girl laughed and thanked the guy for his concern, saying that she was completely fine. Meanwhile, a strange purple flash appeared in the night sky. Two unknown fighters, overflowing with power, were heading straight towards the room where Alan and Hannah were. The best student immediately sensed the enemy approaching. She pushed the guy aside and pulled out her sword, shouting that the killer was coming straight here. Hannah turned to her brother Alan and told him to hide. Alan didn't need to be forced. He had already headed to his bed and said that since Hannah was already feeling better, she should handle it herself, since his working hours were over. Hannah headed towards the killers, because these two were much stronger than Alan's brother anyway, and if he got involved, there would only be more problems. The girl was left alone with her opponents, and was already waiting for them to approach on the street. She gripped her blade tightly and shouted that it was no coincidence that they had come here. A huge blue whirlwind created by Hannah's sword rushed towards the opponents and disrupted their flight path. Two unknown persons landed with a crash in the nearby forest. The refined girl instantly landed where a dark aura emanated from the ground. Standing before her were two of the 4th clan of the Eastern Wasteland, the Purple Spirit Clan. Hannah was confused as to why the Purple Spirit Clan disciples were attacking them, so she asked what they were doing there. But they didn't answer, and their eyes looked especially strange. They were black. The two were bloody puppets, their souls consumed by magic, turning them into mindless dolls. This is the magic of the demon sect. Apparently, the disappearance of an entire village is also their work. The strength of these two is equivalent to the 3rd or 4th level of the Purple Palace, and one must be careful. Hannah, covered in blue chakra, landed slowly and said that they upset her. The girl took out her slashing blade and summoned her sword technique. Then she used a powerful ability, clouds that broke the moon, and everything around began to fly into pieces. A powerful wave created by the sword was directed towards the opponents. But the girl and the boy were able to deftly jump away and dodge her attack. However, this was not the end, and Hannah commanded her blade to dissipate. After that, the blue blade immediately split into 2 parts and flew at the enemies. The targets were immediately hit, and small flashes from the explosions ran across their bodies. The cut and beaten fighters lost their strength and fell to the ground. Meanwhile, Alan watched the fight and was surprised at how easily Hannah was able to separate the light from the sword. But apparently the force of the blow has also decreased, and by the way, it's much more convenient to watch the fight this way. You don't even have to open your eyes. However, these two certainly did not plan to give up so easily. With difficulty, the girl raised herself up onto her hands and tried to stand up. She called Hannah sick and said that she didn't dare do this to them. The best student realized that these guys had not completely become bloody puppets. Apparently, there was still a trace of self-awareness in their heads. The subordinate girl got angry and shouted that she would kill Hannah for what she did to them. She jumped towards the girl and swung her staff, concentrating her purple chakra. The two girls clashed in battle, and Hannah was able to block the staff's attack with her sword in time. However, the block was not easy for her. Hannah was surprised that her opponent could wield such a formidable weapon so easily. The enraged girls continued to attack each other, but no one wanted to give in. The air around them became electrified. The blows became faster and faster, so much so that at one point their outlines were difficult to discern. Hannah couldn't understand what kind of strength her opponent had. Even the girl's hands went numb from such blows. And the purple girl continued to attack and twirled her staff above her head to try again to defeat her opponent. She gathered a huge amount of chakra and fired a stream of arcane energy towards Hannah. Meanwhile, Hannah realized that everything was about to end. Her sword also charged for the next attack. Alan was happy for the girl, because in such a short time she had managed to study her opponent, which was to be expected from the best student. Even though they are on the 4th level of the Purple Palace, they are now just puppets. Their consciousness is sealed, so they can only fight using instincts. Hannah closed her eyes and tried to concentrate to gather all her chakra for one powerful blow. A powerful stream of mana formed around the girl, which was so huge that it went up into the sky like a column. Seeing such power, the purple girl became afraid. But Alan was worried about Hannah because it seemed his sister was unaware of the danger. The boy picked up a leaf from a tree that had flown into his window and decided that that would be enough. Having gathered enough chakra, Hannah summoned her slashing sword technique. She drew her sword and a powerful wave of energy shot out at the speed of sound towards the purple girl. She tried to protect herself by forming a shield out of her chakra. However, the shield was too weak compared to the enormous chakra power that the top swordswoman's apprentice summoned. After the battle, the purple girl lay in a pile of collapsed rocks, and Hannah thought about how to quickly free these fighters from the spell. But the beauty did not notice how behind her, the second fighter raised his fan. He waved his weapon, and immediately a purple lightning bolt, sharp as a needle, shot towards the girl's back. Hannah turned around and realized what had happened, but it was too late. She only managed to create a small shield and try to protect herself. However, the shield was too weak and thin, and the purple blade easily broke through the protection and headed straight for the girl's eyes. But suddenly, a leaf flew in like lightning, reflecting the attack and changing the trajectory of the blow, protecting Hannah. The purple blade flew past the girl's head and crashed into the mountain, creating a huge explosion. The wind blew, fluttering her beautiful hair, and for a moment she realized that someone had just saved her. One of the purple warriors sat in front of the girl, and she knew that if she missed such a blow, the injury would be very serious. But what this green light was that saved her life, she did not know, and she still has to find out. Hannah moved lightning fast towards the enemy and went behind him. She struck the guy's neck with the hilt of her sword and easily knocked him out. After some time, the girl returned to Alan's room and sat the two unconscious prisoners on chairs. Alan praised the student, saying that she had successfully managed everything. But one question was bothering the girl. She tried to ask about it, but the guy immediately said that he had been lying in the room all this time. Then he smiled carefreely and asked what had happened and what was bothering her so much. The girl waved it off and replied that nothing had happened, but she thought to herself that with his level, he would hardly be able to do something like that, so there was no point in asking Alan about it. She also said that while the spirit of these guys was still alive, they should hurry and return them to the clan. They should ask the elders to cleanse their hearts and drive out the evil formation from them so that they would stop being puppets. But if they leave, the demon clan members will run away and do their dirty deeds elsewhere. Alan stood up and said that for the sake of the people and the 3 days off, he would try to do something. Hannah was surprised that the guy began to concentrate his chakra and asked what exactly he was going to do. Alan replied that he would use his divine sense to penetrate their consciousness and expel the formation. Hannah panicked and screamed that the guy had gone crazy, because this is a very complex practice. The slightest carelessness can lead to the complete destruction of the soul. The guy calmed her down, asking her not to worry, and extended his hands to the heads of the prisoners. But seeing this, Hannah panicked even more because he wanted to turn them from puppets at the same time, and that was even more difficult. Alan answered her that saving a person is like putting out a fire, the faster the better. A little time passed, and the purple girl opened her violet eyes, which were once black. Her brother was glad that Sarah had finally woken up. The girl began to rub her tired eyes, trying to fully wake up. But then her consciousness finally returned to her, and she turned towards our heroes. Seeing Alan and Hannah, she asked if they were students of the Swordsman clan. Hannah formally greeted Sarah and introduced herself and her friend Alan. The brother began to calm the girl down, saying that she was the best student of their clan, and they saved them. The boys were able to rescue them from the trap set by the elder of the demon clan. Alan asked Sarah to tell him in more detail how it happened. The girl lowered her eyes and began to tell this sad story. A week ago, he and Brian were ordered to go to the village to investigate the disappearance of residents. They questioned everyone and followed them to a strange place in the forest. In it, the elder of the demon clan used the blood of the villagers for sacrifice. In the end, they fell into a trap that he had prepared in advance. All these demons and images created by the elder suppressed the consciousness of the fighters. They ended up becoming the elder's puppets and could do nothing more about it. Therefore, the first thing Sarah did was to thank her new friend for saving her. Hannah started waving her off and telling the girl not to thank her. After all, she didn't do anything, but the one who saved the boys was that lazy brother Alan. Sarah turned towards Alan and thanked him, saying that they would definitely repay their debt. Hannah stood shyly behind the carefree boy and thought about what happened. He had just managed to free 2 people at once from the curse of the blood puppet. It happened so quickly that it seemed as if he didn't even try, which surprised his best student. Usually this spell affects the deepest corners of the consciousness. Getting rid of it without harming a person is like finding a needle in a haystack. Even not all elders manage to get rid of it. After using the technique, Hannah immediately asked Alan when he was able to master such a complex technique. The guy replied that he had been while away his time in the elder's pavilion and had accidentally stumbled upon a fragment of a scroll of practices for manipulating spiritual thoughts. He had found it quite interesting, so he had studied it. The information amazed Hannah more and more. He had not even found a whole scroll, but only a fragment, and was able to learn such a technique. Suddenly, Alan interrupted her memories, saying that in order to save the boys, he needed to use resources and artifacts worth almost 30,000 high-grade spirit stones. The girl puffed out her cheeks angrily, thinking that the guy probably did it by accident and would never have had such a burst of courage. Sarah looked at Alan and realized that he was far from stupid. So she happily agreed to make up for everything as soon as they returned to their clan. Hannah was amazed that they actually agreed, and Alan smiled triumphantly. It is now recognized that the formation of cleansing the heart and destroying evil, capable of dispelling the curse of the blood puppet, requires at least 50,000 stones, so 30,000 is a good price for friendship. Alan made a sweet face and asked them not to rush, because their clans were friends with each other, so it was their duty to help them. He also asked the two to remember the details of their abduction. Sarah said that the man's name was Lloyd. His fighting power was not very great, and she would be able to deal with him on her own. But he uses formations and poisons very well, which is why the couple was able to get caught so easily. Alan delighted them by saying that if that was the case, he had a special elixir that could make them immune to poisons for 3 hours. He would give it to 3 fighters, and they would defeat the Elder. Sarah's morale soared, and she shouted that if she had immunity to the poisonous incense, she would kill this enemy in minutes. But then she again remembered all the words that Alan had said. She asked why only the 3 of them would go. Would Alan really stay here and not go with them? The boy bowed his head and replied that it actually took him too much spiritual power to save them. So he would have to sleep to recover, while Hannah could barely restrain herself from hitting this lazy guy. The purple couple apologized, saying that they were too blind to see the hard work of Brother Alan. They decided that the 3 of them could handle it while Alan was resting, but Hannah realized that the lazy guy had deceived everyone again so as not to do anything. After some time, a new team set out to search for the Demon Elder. Sarah looked at the small blue sphere and asked if it was really the magic elixir that Brother Alan had spoken of. Hannah answered her that they should believe him because he had already saved them several times. After these words, all 3 fighters took the magic pill. Sarah noticed that the elixir melted pleasantly in her mouth and was no different from ordinary pills. Brian added that it wasn't that he didn't trust Alan, but his level of cultivation was very low. The team continued walking through the forest. The moon had already appeared in the sky, and it became somehow too quiet around. Hannah took up her sword, noticing that something was wrong. Brian confirmed her words, saying that there was not a single living soul here. Sarah began to panic. She guessed what had happened. An unknown, gloomy voice confirmed their suspicions, saying that they had found themselves on his territory. Hannah reacted to the enemy with lightning speed and sent a whirlwind of sword towards him. The whirlwind blades immediately struck several eyes. But there was nothing in that direction. The treetops had dispersed, and she saw a strange swamp that wasn't there. Brian assumed that these were parts of dead creatures that had been dealt with here. Hannah asked if the boys had seen who had just spoken to them. But suddenly, a gloomy figure in a cloak standing behind the girl answered her that he was here. Demon Clan Elder Lloyd has driven his prey into his trap. The heroes turned around, and Sarah shouted that it was the one who caught them then. Lloyd asked how they managed to get rid of his curse so quickly. Apparently, the best disciple of the Sword Clan has secret treasures that can remove his curse. Lloyd was also curious why there were only 3 fighters. He assumed that one of them got scared when he found out that he was behind all this. Sarah got angry and shouted at the villain that Alan wasn't there because she could handle such a dud herself. After these words, the girl directed her first attack at Lloyd, and the battle began. The stones on the ground where the impact fell began to crumble, mixed with purple energy. In the dust raised from the ground, Sarah tried to make out where her enemy was. In the middle of the dark fog, Lloyd appeared and told the girl that she had already lost, having fallen for his trick. Brian immediately appeared behind the demon and shouted at the man that he was no longer a survivor. Waving his fan, he aimed his needle-sharp spell at Lloyd's head. But he easily rebuffed it by saying that although they were the best students of their clans, they were still fools. Then he smiled and asked if they liked the smell. Brian and Sarah immediately realized that they were inhaling poison right now. Hannah also did not stand aside and attacked the dark bubble in which Lloyd was located. The master also easily repelled her attack, continuing to mock them. But suddenly he noticed that the blue lightning did not dissipate. She continues to pierce his dark bubble like a swift wind. Eventually, the blade's whirlwind broke through Lloyd's defenses, and an explosion occurred. 3 fighters were already in the air and waiting for their opponent. The dust from the explosion cleared, and Hannah saw a small hole where Lloyd had stood. She became angry when she realized that they had missed the villain. But at that very second, the air turned scarlet, and a dark fog formed around the heroes. It was poisonous incense. Lloyd emerged from the poisonous fog, and he really did have his tricks. The master hung in the air right above our heroes and sprayed his crimson mist. He laughed and shouted that it was useless for the warriors to run away anywhere because they had already inhaled his poison. It only takes 10 breaths, and they will immediately turn into bloody puppets and become his faithful servants. However, nothing happened and the guys stood and smiled. At that moment, Lloyd realized that something was wrong here. And then he realized that the third fighter was missing, who was already swinging his huge staff behind the master's back. Sarah took advantage of the moment and hit Lloyd on the back. The force of the blow was colossal, and the master immediately spat out a lot of blood. Then he rushed towards the ground at the speed of sound until he crashed into it. Brian also wanted revenge. He prepared his fan to finish off the enemy. Swinging his weapon, several sharp chakra needles shot out at the prone Lloyd. The purple needles mercilessly struck their opponent in every part of his body. The demon elder drew blood, his most fearsome weapon no longer working. He stood on his hands with difficulty and bled, trying to understand how it happened. The master raised his bloodied gaze to the team. He didn't find an answer to his question, so he asked them why his poison didn't work on them. And the squad of fighters only mocked the once powerful villain. Sarah was glad that Alan's elixir was really that strong. The resistance to poisons would help them deal with all the members of the demon sect. Lloyd knew that this poison was even stronger than the previous one, and even if he held his breath, it would be absorbed into the skin. And nothing but his special antidote can dispel it. Then why doesn't he take these warriors? Apparently they have some kind of secret. Hannah said it was time to finish with him and prepared to use her sword technique. But Lloyd wasn't going to give up so easily. He wiped away his blood and said that this was far from the end. The demon elder immediately jumped and lifted himself off the ground. Having covered a great distance with lightning speed, he said that the game had only just begun. Flying into the sky, he summoned a bloody flame of heavenly formation and covered the entire area below him. The girls who found themselves in the area panicked and tried to understand what was happening. Lloyd scoffed and reminded them that they were trespassing on his territory. He ordered the first one to get rid of them, and at that very second, something began to form from the mud behind their backs. Brian turned in horror to see a man begin to form out of the mud. A powerful, enraged demon who was ready to tear everyone apart. The team realized that it was a 6th-level blood puppet of the Purple Palace. Lloyd continued to taunt the boys, telling them that they would definitely not be returning home today. Speaking of the house, Lloyd sent a second one there. He has the 5th level of the Purple Palace, and he will deal with the coward hiding there. Hannah immediately began to worry about Alan, because he was too weak to cope with such an opponent. Meanwhile, Alan was sleeping peacefully and was not at all interested in the outcome of the battle. And a terrible demon with 6 eyes had already entered his house through the window. But to his surprise, he found no one on the bed, and there was not a soul in the house. The cunning Alan was lying in the next room and had no intention of working overtime. He turned over to sleep, but then an explosion thundered behind him. It was a trap that Alan had left for the demon. But to his surprise, the enemy was not torn apart, and some silhouette stood behind him. It was a demon who was struggling in agony and screaming because he had received many wounds. Actually, no, the trap was too weak for him. Alan had to get out of bed. He realized that the demon would not be able to return until it caught him. The guy didn't understand whether it was really necessary to involve him in all this. Meanwhile, a fierce battle unfolded in the forest. Hannah concentrated her power and used her sword technique to create a water hurricane. The blood puppet, meanwhile, began to form a clot of energy to repel the attack. He then put up an impenetrable shield, and the blades of water crashed into it without causing any damage. But suddenly Sarah appears behind the monster, taking advantage of the situation and the fact that the enemy was distracted. The girl tried to attack him with her staff, but the bloody puppet successfully blocked the blow. Then the monster took hold of Sarah's staff, and with a powerful movement of his hand, he threw the girl away from him. Brian was angry and summoned one of his techniques, the sealing purple chains. Having come up from behind, the sealing chains seemed to have successfully begun to bind their enemy. But the monster was not so weak. He gathered his energy and began to scream with all his might. The chains that bound him broke, but Hannah managed to take advantage of the moment and strike the immobilized enemy's body. The girl was focused and confident that she had succeeded this time. And indeed, the monster's body was cut into 2 parts. No one can survive such wounds. But the bloody puppet didn't care. After the separation, he immediately landed on his severed part and grew back together. Hannah couldn't believe her eyes when she saw this. Meanwhile, the monster decided to attack its opponents and jump towards them. Brian was the first to be hit, and he immediately flew back, covered in blood. Then Hannah was also attacked and was also unable to dodge. Sarah, noticing her comrade's loss, immediately shouted their names. Blood was flowing from under Brian's head. Seeing this, Sarah became angry. No one could touch her brother. The girl jumped from her seat with lightning speed and landed behind the bloody monster. Her rage gave her strength, and she was able to hit the monster's back with her staff. However, the monster that received the blow jumped away from her to a safe distance. This time was enough for Hannah to come to her senses. The girl landed next to Sarah and said that this guy was so strong that with his endless regeneration, they would simply run out of steam over time. Sarah said with a serious expression that she had a secret way to destroy him. Hannah was glad because hope appeared, but Sarah needed time to build up her strength. So the purple girl asked Hannah to buy her some time. The best student prepared for battle, saying that she could rely on her. Lloyd mocked them, saying that if they had any tricks up their sleeves, they should use them now. These puppets were the masterpiece of his collection of bloody techniques, so they would all soon be finished. Suddenly the master felt something strange. Number 2 didn't move, and the master thought that he must have finished with the coward too quickly. However, everything was not so simple. The bloody puppet was bound by Alan's blue fetters. The boy looked at the bloody puppet and said that the elders must not know about this under any circumstances. But he just wanted to sleep peacefully without any unnecessary noise. And if the puppet doesn't do this, then he will give her something in return. After these words, Alan immediately grabbed the puppet by the hair. He slowly walked towards the window, holding the monster by the hair. The guy looked into the distance where a fierce battle was raging and saw only a strange red dome. Brother Alan raised the shackled blood puppet like a spear and began to aim. Then he threw the monster with all his might towards the dome and shouted at him to go back and let him sleep. Due to the force of the throw, the monster flew so far into the sky that it could no longer be seen. Alan, meanwhile, turned around and thought that he still had a little time to rest. He wanted to go see if there were any more free rooms here, because he needed to get some more sleep. Meanwhile, Hannah continued to buy time and was hit with many blows from the puppet. The girl tried to block the fists with her sword, but their power was great, and Hannah's power was decreasing, so the girl flew away a short distance. She was all wounded, but she didn't really have a choice. The girl did not understand why this bloody puppet was becoming stronger and stronger. Lloyd told the girl that since she was still holding on, it was not for nothing that she was called the best student of the Sword Clan, but all this would soon end. He ordered his first blood puppet to attack the girl. The monster immediately obeyed and pounced on Hannah with great speed. He gathered furious energy around himself and jumped into the air above the girl. Hannah closed her eyes and mentally asked everyone for forgiveness, because for the first time in her life, she was afraid. But suddenly, behind Lloyd, a strange red flash appeared in the sky. Lloyd sensed something was wrong and turned around to see a red object rushing towards him at the speed of sound. The bloody monster thrown by Alan crashed into the bloody barrier like a bullet and pierced it right through. Hannah and the demon elder were stunned by this turn of events. When the dust from the fall cleared, they saw the second and first bloody puppets, which were broken and lying in a pile of dirt. Only now did Lloyd realize what had happened, and he became furious. He couldn't believe that such a thing was even possible. And Hannah was glad that if the second puppet was here, it meant that everything was okay with her brother Alan. Apparently, one of the elders came and was able to protect the guy. Lloyd thought the same thing, and he knew that if the elders had come here, it could be a problem for him. Therefore, he must hurry and finish the fight as quickly as possible. The master used the blood puppet's strengthening ability, and the monsters came to life again. One of the puppets recovered and jumped on the defenseless Hannah. The girl tried to get into a defensive stance, but her feet became stuck in the mud created by the monster. But Sarah came to the girl's aid in time and apologized for the fact that the student had to wait for her for so long. Sarah's eyes were filled with rage. They shimmered with a purple light similar to sparks of true thunder. Lloyd was shocked to see the 4th level of the Purple Palace. This girl can't resist him. However, Sarah used the purple shadow technique and easily blocked the blood puppet's attack. Her power was so great that the explosion from the staff could be seen from a great distance. So far, that the purple glow reached even the sleeping Alan, but the guy was prepared for this, and his night mask did not let the light through. Morning came, and our main lazybones calmly got out of bed. He went to the window to enjoy the fresh air and the rays of the just-risen sun. It seemed like this is how every good morning should start. But not everything was so wonderful. A huge explosion in the distance was disturbing the landscape, and Alan thought that today was some kind of explosive day. Apparently, Sister Hannah and the others had been fighting all night long, and this elder turned out to be no easy opponent. Alan slowly put his hand in his pocket. He took out his watch to see what time it was. It was time to work. Meanwhile, the girls stood near a large patch of mud. Everything in the area was destroyed, rocks were crushed, and trees were uprooted. Charged, Sarah looked at the smoldering body of the bloody puppet. Suddenly, the girl fell to her knees, exhausted. They had been fighting all night and were quite exhausted. Hannah, looking at Sarah trembling in pain, told her that her technique was indeed very powerful. Suddenly, Brian appeared behind her and explained that this was their secret technique. The accumulated power was released in one breath. But the disadvantage of the technology is also obvious. This technology is too energy-intensive. Sarah, who was barely able to stand on her feet, said that this time they had succeeded, and it was all thanks to Hannah. The bloodied girl brushed it off, saying she was just doing her job. Their sweet exchange of pleasantries was interrupted by Lloyd, who shouted that they were 3 freaks. Exhausted, Sarah realized that the battle was not over yet. The main enemy remained. The enraged master said that the team had practically destroyed the number 1, which he had spent several decades creating. Sarah raised her staff with difficulty, preparing for battle, but her brother said that there was no need to try to fight because the girl's spiritual strength was almost exhausted. Suddenly, Hannah said that she would take on this enemy herself because she had rested a little while Sarah was fighting the monster. The powerful warrior began to accumulate her energy for an attack. Lloyd also began to form bloody hands, shouting that the 3 of them would be buried here today. Powerful hands of dark matter moved towards the small, fragile girl. Hannah used her sword technique and a stream of water like a whip erupted from his blade. A powerful, needle-like blade pierced the demon elder's black magic. Moving further, it reached the place where a gap had formed in the dome. Meanwhile, the claws created by Lloyd had almost achieved their goal. But the girl was not the best student for nothing. She instantly cut the bloody magic into small pieces. Lloyd glared at Hannah, noting that she was quite strong. He was curious whether the girl could handle his other technique. However, the dome on which Lloyd stood suddenly began to crack. Then it simply burst, shattering into thousands of tiny pieces. Only now did Lloyd realize that the girl was aiming at the previously made hole. The master didn't expect that Hannah would have enough strength for something like this. But he was not going to give up, after which the master unexpectedly shot himself straight in the head. He absorbed the power of the dome and his blood magic completely into his body. Squeezing the blood to the limit, the master summoned a pentagram, which he filled with the remains of his power. Hannah realized that things were bad. It was obvious that the master wanted to use a secret technique. But suddenly her impulse was stopped by drops of blood that hit the girl in the back. The demon elder sealed her acupuncture points to release spiritual energy. But that wasn't all. The purple allies' faces were also subjected to a strange bloody attack. Then the allies opened their eyes, and Hannah saw that they had turned black. The master's blood puppet technique was not as easy to dispel as it turned out. The demon elder ordered number 3 and number 4 to capture the student. Lloyd told her that although she was talented, in front of him she was like a little child. But such power shouldn't go to waste, so Hannah will become his new number 1. The master summoned his bloody hand to perform the seal and said that her blood would make a fine offering. The claws rushed towards Hannah, and the girl mentally apologized to the elders for the fact that their best student was defeated by the devil's spawn. The sweet beauty burst into tears, remembering her brother Alan, because she promised him to be careful. The claws almost reached their target, but suddenly someone shouted at him to stop. A man hung behind Lloyd and ordered the master to let the girl go. The demon elder turned around, and the tearful Hannah immediately recognized the hero. Lloyd didn't understand where the guy came from. He began to look around, assuming that this was the same elder who killed number 2. Brother Alan told the master not to look back because the boy came alone. Hannah began to panic and scream for her brother Alan to run as fast as he could because he couldn't defeat him. Lloyd smiled. He knew that Alan was no match for him. Since the guy came himself, the master decided to start with him first. A carefree Alan snapped his fingers and said one word, destruction. At that very second, Lloyd was attacked by purple energy that came out of nowhere. He couldn't believe what had just happened. Behind him, number 3 appeared and used her magical power. It was impossible. The blood puppet formation Lloyd had reactivated was several times stronger than the usual one. No matter how powerful Alan was, he couldn't just dispel it. However, everything was as it should be, and Brian, having regained his sanity, had already directed his ceiling chain technique at the enemy. The guy's sister also did not stand aside and was already waving her staff behind the chained Lloyd. The girl shouted at the old man to come down to the ground, and after these words, she slammed him into the dirt with a strong blow. Bloody smoke was emanating from the resulting crater where Lloyd landed. Hannah turned to her lazy brother and looked at him with confusion. The girl was shocked by what he just did. How was it possible that the weakest swordmaster could defeat the Demon Clan elder with a single snap of his fingers? Sarah asked her brother Alan what exactly he had done. The guy replied that it was just a little trick that he had thought out in advance. It all started when he extracted the bloody seed from the bodies of these two. He found that his rhizome had struck the depths of the boys' souls. Alan was afraid of damaging them, and so only extracted the seed. The sharp blades of the sword cut through the seed around the rhizome like thin branches. This meant that they could still be manipulated at any time because the root was still sealed in their souls. So Alan left a few threads of the sword in their minds. Once the Demon Clan elder attempts to activate the seed again, the threads will stop him, and at a critical moment, this could turn the tide of battle. The purple warriors immediately bowed their heads and thanked Alan, saying that they admired him. Hannah asked why Alan didn't tell her about it, in case the plan failed. The guy replied that the girl had succeeded in the end, but she had already begun to get upset, feeling useless. Then he encouraged her by saying that if it weren't for her, nothing would have worked out for him. After all, Hannah is the very person who has the power to defeat the elder of the Demon Clan. The delighted girl asked if the guy was lying. Alan, meanwhile, was thinking that if he had told her everything, the girl might not have had enough acting skills to fool this elder. Sarah also supported Hannah, saying that if it weren't for her, they wouldn't have been able to deal with the master so easily. The best student was delighted and agreed with everyone, and Alan nodded his head affirmatively. The girl looked at the guy and thought that despite his low level, his wisdom, strategic thinking, and insight were superbly developed. Alan, meanwhile, recalled that he had decided to get this work done quickly in order to go on vacation early. But suddenly they heard a loud roar and felt powerful chakra. The blood formation was activated again, meaning the battle was not over yet. The elder was still alive, and right now bloody energy was gathering around him. Alan was disappointed. He knew the early leaves sounded too good to be true. The battered, scarred elder was on his knees, trying to get up. His bloody offspring began to rise, and something began to emerge from the man's body. Alan watched all this from above and did not understand what he was doing. A spear covered in black runes slowly emerged from the demon elder's belly. Hannah realized that things were bad and that she needed to stop the object from appearing, so she used her secret technique. The laughing villain, meanwhile, rose to his feet and grabbed his spear. The girl used the sword-breaking technique, and numerous bolts of lightning rushed towards the master. But he only laughed and said that it was too late. He raised his dark spear, and Hannah's attack was instantly blocked with ease. The elder smiled ominously and said that his formation was complete. The girl didn't know what to do. This was her last chance to destroy the enemy because she no longer had any strength left. At that very moment, Brian said that it was time to retreat because their strength was not enough to fight the master. Hannah agreed to this, and the three tried to escape. However, Alan told the guys to leave first, and he would catch up with them later. Hannah turned around and asked what the guy was waiting for. They needed to leave quickly. But Lloyd didn't want to let them go just like that. He summoned a huge projection that stretched its hands towards the heroes. In a split second, the summoned monster grabbed all 4 heroes in a tight grip. Lloyd shouted that now he would show these pathetic insects the power of real poison. Sarah said that the master was able to catch her because her powers were exhausted, and Brian lost all hope after realizing that the elder was invincible. Hannah looked at the monster and couldn't understand how he instantly jumped from the 5th level of the Purple Palace to the 8th level. Sarah didn't want to die like that, and her brother suggested that he became so strong because he absorbed his puppets. Lloyd told them that number 1 and number 2 were the best in his collection, and he didn't even think that the 3 of them could defeat them. Sarah said that even though number 1 was stronger than them, they would definitely have dealt with number 2, but now these 3 were one. Lloyd laughed and told the team that he was a victim too. He said that he was forcibly raised to be a bloodthirsty soldier. Then he raised his staff, and it began to summon something. The boys did not understand what the master's words meant. Meanwhile, only one hero was not interested in the fight. He was looking at his watch, and Hannah asked him what he was doing. Brian said that ancient books say that demon warriors first appeared 10,000 years ago. Countless decent people were beheaded, and most of the lands came to belong to the demon clan, and only when the 5 clans united among themselves to resist them were they able to defeat the demon clan troops and put an end to this disaster. Lloyd laughed again and said that he had witnessed many things. He had seen bloodshed, souls taken by force. All of this helps shape warriors like him. And today, the team of heroes was given the honor of becoming an offering to his bloody formation. But suddenly his solemn speech was interrupted by a disgusting sound. Lloyd didn't understand what the sound was, while Alan looked at his watch. His working day is over, and it looks like he will have to work overtime. Lloyd didn't understand the guy's words and asked again what it meant to work overtime. At that very moment, a huge wave of energy flew towards the invincible demon elder. A powerful stream of chakra immediately knocked the master out of the summoned formation. The weakest student told Lloyd that his time of death had come. Hannah was surprised to see such powerful equipment. She asked Alan if it was his doing, but the guy only answered that they needed to get out of there as soon as possible. The girl wanted to object, but the hero said that they should get out of here as quickly as possible and protect the village from attack. In a panic, Hannah asked the guy who defeated Puppet Number 2, they need to call this elder here quickly, because they themselves cannot cope with this enemy. Hannah's comrades also supported him, telling Alan that he shouldn't be brave, because thanks to this formation, Lloyd's strength had increased to at least the 8th level of the Purple Palace, so even with their combined efforts they couldn't cope. But the hero, smiling, told his friends not to worry, because everything would soon end. Meanwhile, Lloyd, who had fallen to the ground, got up. He did not understand what had just happened, because the guy's level should not be enough to defeat him. The demon elder asked Alan what trick he had just used to stop him. Alan, mocking his opponent, replied that he didn't need tricks to defeat such a weakling. Meanwhile, Hannah and her purple friends were heading towards the village. Sarah asked the girl why they left him there alone. She couldn't believe that the guy actually knew a way to defeat such a formidable enemy, who at that moment directed his blood chakra at Alan. Blood lightning hit Alan straight. Sarah continued to say that the hero was too low level and that demon would destroy him with one blow. Hannah answered the girl that she didn't know why, but she trusted Alan, because since he left the mountain, all his decisions had been correct. The powerful sluggard parried the attack with his blade and looked at Lloyd with the gaze of a bloodthirsty killer. The demon panicked. He wanted to know what he was going to do now. Meanwhile, the tired team arrived at the village, where everything was peaceful and calm. Hannah summoned an artifact that looked like a pentagonal mirror. It was the castle of the heavenly spirit. The girl gathered her strength and threw it into the sky. The Sky Spirit Castle flew through the air and hung above the village, creating an impenetrable blue shield around it. Seeing the blue dome, Alan was delighted and told his opponent that he could now calmly attack him. Lloyd laughed evilly, amused by the confidence of a weakling like Alan in his victory. The hero answered him that he wanted to say that if Lloyd still had an ace up his sleeve, then he needed to use it as soon as possible, because the demon would not have another chance. The student's excessive pathos infuriated Lloyd, and he pointed his spear into the air, gathering powerful force. A bright scarlet dome with a spear in its center fell upon Alan. Lloyd called it a bloody blow with a halberd. The demon elder smiled, because it was not so easy to escape from such an attack. But suddenly for the villain, Alan slowly landed in front of him, glowing with a blue aura. The guy mocked his opponent and asked if Lloyd had any more attacks. Rage filled the demon elder. He swung his halberd, trying to hit Alan. But he dodged again. Then the villain summoned a huge column of blood that looked like a hurricane. Power flew around him like hot magma. It was one of Lloyd's abilities, the demonic light of the heavens. These red thunderstorms were visible even from the village. Sarah was stunned to see such powerful magic, so that's what the demon warrior's power was capable of. Meanwhile, poor Hannah cried and prayed that her brother Alan would survive. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Lloyd's laughter died down because Alan spoke to him. The guy asked his opponent what good was such a skill if Lloyd couldn't fully control its power. And at that very second, blue blades rushed towards the demon. The blades, like the claws of an enraged beast, cut through the bloody hurricane summoned by Lloyd. The demon elder trembled as he saw his ability disappear. It seemed like just a bad dream. This should be impossible. Alan must be using some kind of illusion. Meanwhile, the guy appeared out of thin air and asked Lloyd if he knew how he, a simple cultivator, could so easily resist him. In fact, everything is extremely simple. The fact is that Alan specially sealed his kingdom. He never practiced in front of other people, fearing that if they found out about his true level, disaster would be unavoidable. Alan easily repelled all of the demon's attacks without even looking at him, and continued his story, saying that it was not fitting for a student of his clan to boast about his skills. After all, the higher your skills, the more problems fall on your head. Therefore, in order not to complicate his life, Alan was forced to hide his true abilities. Lloyd realized what a trap he had fallen into. The demon tried to leave, shouting that the guy was simply crazy and insane. But Alan pulled the enemy's body towards himself, saying that he did not let him go. Taking his sword out of its sheath, the hero said that Lloyd interrupted his rest time and again. Moreover, he harmed his comrades, thereby forcing him to start work ahead of time. Lloyd tried to run away again, shouting that the guy shouldn't have been there. Alan's gaze was stern, because starting work ahead of time was an unforgivable sin. After these words, the hero released his sword-slashing technique at the enemy. A powerful stream of chakra, like a raging wave, passed through Lloyd and struck him. The clouds Lloyd had summoned cleared, and the sun appeared from behind them. The battle was ended with one blow. The technique was so powerful that in the place where it passed, the earth split and a river was formed. The mighty sluggard hung in the air and watched Lloyd's spear cool down. Sarah, who was watching the battle, asked Hannah if they were really only at the Purple Palace level. After all, the power of this sword was comparable to that of a cultivator who had long since surpassed this level, and it seemed that Brother Alan was the elder of their clan. Meanwhile, Hannah was shocked by what she saw. It turns out that Brother Alan had long since surpassed the levels of all the students in their clan. The girl lowered her gaze. At that moment, she felt helpless in comparison to him. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. The power of Alan's sword was too great, and the dome began to crack, about to shatter into pieces. Hannah ordered her friends to hurry and evacuate the villagers, and she would take care of the rest. Even though Hannah couldn't deal with that demon, she will at least try to save these lives. The girl began to concentrate her energy. It was difficult for her to hold back the dome when suddenly a man's hand appeared next to her hand. Seeing the familiar garment, Hannah was surprised. Next to her stood her brother Alan, who with his power helped the girl restore the protective barrier. A moment later, all the cracks in the barrier healed, and not a single resident of the city was harmed. The worried girl turned to the guy and shouted his name. After some time, the residents fell on their knees and thanked their four saviors. The purple fighters waved to the residents, while Hannah wanted to talk to Alan. She looked at the guy with pitiful eyes and asked why he hadn't told her earlier that he was so strong. Brother Alan made a stupid face and said that he didn't understand what the girl was talking about. After all, he defeated this demon only thanks to the talisman that the elder of their clan gave him. This answer stunned the guy's entire team. Hannah thought that Alan had released the sword, but the guy turned on his acting skills and said that a weakling like him would never have such strength. And only thanks to the desperate resistance of his team did he manage to activate the power of the talisman that the master gave him. And besides, Alan believes that it was the guys who wore out the demon, and the sword only finished him off. The guy shouted enthusiastically that he was just lucky, nothing more. Something didn't add up here. Hannah asked how the guy managed to so skillfully dodge the demon's attacks. Alan was caught at this question and didn't know what to answer, and the girl just looked at him intently. Then Alan replied that in fact his main specialization is avoiding attacks, so dodging is not that problematic for him. He looked at the beauty and added that she knew that their master was the best in the clan. It was his power that killed the demon. But Hannah didn't calm down. She asked about that protective barrier, because a student of that level couldn't stabilize such a formation. Alan reached into his robe to take out something and said that he used it. In his hand was a green stone. It was the Hidden Spirit Jade. Hidden Spirit Jade is a stone that can store spiritual power and call upon it at any time. Due to its high cost and rarity, it is not popular. But Hannah still didn't believe him. The hero's story was quite smooth, but her intuition told her that something was wrong. Suddenly, Alan put his hand on her head and told the girl not to give free rein to her imagination, because if he was really strong, then the master and the elder would have known about it long ago. And Alan also believes that Hannah is the best student in the clan. There is definitely no doubt about that. The cutie became embarrassed at these words and shouted that Alan had used a sudden attack of compliments on her. Speaking of that demon, Sarah wanted to know what happened to him in the end. Alan replied that his body was full of magical power and that he couldn't even be touched now. So the hero created a formation to suppress it. Sometime later, our heroes were at Lloyd's burial site, where the suppression of his power was almost complete. The demon clan had become so enraged that they were training similar soldiers, and Hannah believed that they should inform the other clans about this as soon as possible so that they could take precautions in advance. Alan agreed with her, but first they needed to finish dealing with the demon, when suddenly their conversation was interrupted by a force erupting from the halberd. The chakra bubble burst, and the power of the blood spear was absorbed into Alan's formation. Hannah was horrified, and the hero became wary. They realized that something had gone wrong. The blood spear began to summon a strange circle of fire and blood, the demon's power awakening. Alan reacted instantly and tried to strike the enemy's chakra clot. The remaining heroes managed to jump back, and suddenly, along with the bloody chakra, the spear and the demon's body disappeared. Sarah realized that their master had apparently taken the demon from here, and Brian believed that now was not the time for chatter. It was logical that the master would not simply abandon the creation on which he had spent so much time and effort. But Hannah calmed down the ardent fighters, because they clearly didn't have enough time and energy to pursue them now. Alan, meanwhile, looked at his hand from which his attack had come. He understood that he could not let the girl know how strong he really was. However, this formation that the hero left behind should be strong enough to stop Lloyd. Meanwhile, the unknown figure was in a strange place filled with a bloody aura, where he sat in the middle of candles emitting green light. He opened his mouth wide and absorbed all the bloody aura that flew around him. It was the elder that Alan had defeated at the beginning of the story, and he swore that next time he would tear him into 1,000 tiny pieces. Suddenly his meal was interrupted by another dark figure appearing behind the villain. The elder bowed his head in greeting to his master. The dark, secret figure said that Howard had apparently finished perfecting his body. Howard smiled and said that he couldn't do it without his master's help. Suddenly the master said that Lloyd was dead. This information shocked the elder. The unknown said that he completed the formation before his death and created the demon embryo. However, when the master tried to take it, another force did not allow him to do so. Now the fruit is in the Yun clan prefecture on their mountain range. The master ordered Howard to return it. He also gave 3 things to his subordinate, saying that these artifacts would help him in battle. Howard had failed him last time. If he did it again, he would have to answer for his misdeeds. The elder knelt down and understood his master's order. At this time, our heroes said goodbye to each other because the enemy had disappeared without a trace, and the mission was completed. Hannah and Alan looked at their purple teammates, who had become like a family team for a short time. Sarah and Brian set out on their journey and talked along the way, Brian saying that no one could have expected such a move from the demon clan. The demon's abilities already went far beyond their combat training. But Brian was most concerned not with them, but with his brother Alan's abilities. Sarah was surprised by such words. She did not understand what was wrong with the hero that her brother was worried about this. Brian told her that it was obvious that the guy had been in control from the very beginning, starting from the moment he gave them pills that made them invulnerable to poisons. And what happened to the bloody formations during the battle? When they were ready to accept defeat, Brother Alan appeared and took control of the situation. If it weren't for him, the bloody formation would have covered them all. And indeed, after hearing the information from her brother, Sarah became thoughtful. However, that was not all. Brian asked if the girl remembered the pill that they took. He checked his body using the inner vision technique and found that it was as if he was wrapped from the inside by a protective sword technique. Apparently, what they swallowed was not an antidote, but a pill filled with a beam of sword energy. This was the only reason why the poisons could no longer affect them. The sword energy contained in that pill dispelled all the toxins that entered inside. It seemed impossible, but if your swordsmanship skill is high enough, then theoretically it is possible. But there's only one thing Sarah doesn't understand. If Alan is so powerful, why is he trying so hard to hide it? Brian thought that the hero was some kind of secret weapon for his clan, so Sarah asked if they should tell their leader about it. The pair of purple warriors looked at each other and mentally imagined the consequences. Brian decided that since Alan did not want to reveal his abilities, then they should also remain silent, because the hero saved them, and therefore they should respect his choice. The Sword Clan does have an interesting talent, though. It seems the clan meeting next month will be truly entertaining. Meanwhile, Hannah looked at the strange golden stone and said that it was time to go back. She turned to Alan, saying that the boss had told them not to linger, but the guy didn't seem to be listening to her. He smiled and said that these guys are very smart. Hannah asked who these very smart guys were, and Brother Alan grinned and said that it didn't matter. It was time for them to move on. The hero decided that he should disperse his sword energy. After all, if the head of their clan notices her, it will be a rather unpleasant situation. As Hannah walked home, she suddenly turned to her brother Alan. A sweet girl asked me to tell her honestly if the guy had any secret power. To which Alan replied that he had no need to lie, he was just a 6th-level rookie in the Purple Palace, and he was still far from being a genius like Hannah. It seemed the girl had expected such an answer and only sighed in disappointment. Suddenly, a clot of sharp sword energy flew into Alan's chest. Hannah stood before the hero with a serious face and drew her sword. She was serious. Her blow hit the guy right in the chest, tearing his clothes. Suddenly, a strange book appeared behind the torn clothes. The book was no longer held in place, and, to Alan's surprise, it fell out of his inside pocket. The guy tried to catch her, but Hannah managed to intercept the book in flight. The girl smiled triumphantly. Apparently this was his diary. Now she would know the whole truth. She opened the book when suddenly on its cover she saw a girl and an inscription that said that she and her sister had a great time. Hannah's face immediately turned as red as possible from embarrassment and what she saw. Alan immediately snatched the book from the hands of the embarrassed girl, saying that he would explain everything. It was a fairly popular book. It was just a novel. Hannah said she didn't think the guy was like that. Alan immediately explained that the picture on the cover was just for attention. In fact, it was a serious adventure story. Hannah grabbed the book sharply to look, and on the next page she saw a passionate flirting girl covered in rose petals. She became embarrassed again and turned away sharply, and Alan shouted that she was getting it all wrong, that these were illustrations, they were needed to attract attention. It is actually a story about a young man who is part of a clan and his relationship with his female companions. This is an orthodox adventure story. It is very popular among monks and ordinary mortals. Updates are released every 3 months. Alan had to stand in line all night for this limited edition. It was very difficult to buy. Hannah pretended to believe him when she said she would pay for the clothes she had ruined, but in reality, she was thinking about the fact that the guy hadn't dodged her blow. Apparently, he really didn't have any hidden strength. The girl said that she thought her brother should be less interested in such literature. In their clan, such things are called fiction and are forbidden. She looked sternly at the guy, adding that their leader believed that this was a distraction from practice, and that her brother, more than anyone else, should work harder on himself. Alan smiled sweetly and nodded, saying that that was exactly what he would do. The girl turned around abruptly and said that it was time for them to move on, and the hero exhaled, because now all of Hannah's doubts about him should evaporate. But suddenly another sharp blade of energy flew towards him. This time the blade flew straight into the book the boy was holding. Alan clutched the book to his chest protectively and repelled the attack. The force of energy that erupted from his hand dissolved Hannah's chakra and flew towards the nearest mountain. Half the mountain was instantly destroyed, and at that moment the hero realized how much he had screwed up. Alan asked Hannah if she could pretend she didn't see it, to which she replied that despite her level, she couldn't just turn a blind eye to it. The guy hid his treasure in his bosom. This book let him down again. It was time for excuses. Alan admitted that there were things he hadn't told Hannah. The girl suddenly approached the guy and asked if his skills were much superior to hers, to which Alan stood at attention and replied that they were only slightly superior. A malicious smile appeared on Hannah's face, and she said that she would keep the guy's secret, but he had to promise her something. Fearing for his secret and for what the girl would ask, he asked what she wanted. The sweet beauty's eyes lit up with happiness as she asked her brother Alan to teach her swordsmanship. But the hero wasn't thrilled. He thought this mission would help him get along with his sister and get 3 days off. But for some reason now, he thought that he had screwed up badly, while Hannah, meanwhile, was burning with joy and waiting for the guy's answer. Alan pretended to think about it, answering that in principle he could teach her, but there was one but. The sparkling top student vowed to keep her mouth shut, so the guy wouldn't have to worry. She flew up and said that she couldn't wait to return, and Alan mentally asked the head why everything turned out so badly for him. After some time, the sad and eternally lazy Alan and the inspired student returned home. Our heroes entered the main hall to report to the elders. Hannah greeted the chief, elders, and masters. The men turned around and, seeing their favorite student, said that she had done an excellent job. The master thanked the girl for her hard work and asked if she was injured anywhere. Alan lowered his head and quietly, without much enthusiasm, greeted the head, elders, and masters. In response, they only looked at the guy with disdain. The master asked if the guy on the mission had caused problems for his sister Hannah. If she had suffered while defending the hero, then he was dead. The man hoped that Alan had made every effort to absorb as much knowledge as possible from the girl. In his heart, the hero was very indignant, because if it weren't for him, they would no longer have their beloved student. Suddenly, the head stood up from his chair and demanded that the masters stop slandering Alan. After all, if he hadn't activated the talisman in time, they wouldn't have defeated the elder of the demon clan. Alan smiled. It was not for nothing that he gave so much tea to his beloved friend. The elders looked at the master who had Alan under his command. It turns out that he was a real hero who saved the whole situation. The man said that it was only natural that he gave the protective talisman to his student. The other elders smiled, feeling the master's strength. They praised him for destroying the demon clan elder with just one talisman. However, the master clearly remembered that the talisman he gave to Alan was barely above the first level of the Purple Palace. According to rumors, Lloyd, the elder of the demon clan, was at the 5th level. Is it possible that the master gave Alan the wrong talisman, and that is why he defeated the elder? They were all interrupted by the clan leader, who announced that they had gathered there for only one reason, that their world would soon face a crisis. He asked Hannah to tell everyone what happened after she met the elder of the demon clan. This information is extremely valuable, both for the clan and for the entire alliance. The girl immediately agreed. The meeting ended late in the evening, and a tired Alan was glad about it as he left the building. Starting tomorrow, he will finally be free. He needs to plan his weekend carefully. However, the guy's joy was interrupted by a sweet female voice calling his name. Anticipating new knowledge, Hannah reminded the guy that he should teach her as they agreed. Alan tried to fight off the crazy beauty by saying that he had plans for the coming days, but the girl said that she could not wait any longer because she could learn from such a powerful person as Alan. The guy tried to turn on his acting skills by saying that they were both tired after a tough mission and he needed to rest before he started training her. But Hannah was no slouch either, and with kitten eyes she began to cry, saying that her brother slept all night and she fought. She was a fragile girl and didn't complain, so why was Alan complaining then? But you can't take the guy with that. He said that he was tired because he made a big contribution to the victory. Then the crazy Hannah grabbed him by the clothes and threatened that if he didn't help her, she would tell everyone about their relationship. Alan panicked because they were at the main entrance. He asked the girl not to talk nonsense. What other relationship? But the girl screamed that she didn't care because he himself was avoiding responsibilities. She said that her brother was a fraud. Suddenly the hero agreed, and the sweet beauty immediately calmed down. Alan said that she could come to him this evening, and then he would teach her a lesson. But after this, Hannah had to leave him alone. The girl, with eyes sparkling with joy, agreed. She must also remember to keep the secret. If anyone sees Hannah going to Alan late at night, all the monks will chop him into mincemeat or hang him on the gallows. But she didn't care anymore. She shouted that she remembered everything and said goodbye to the teacher. A few hours later, our hero arrived at his house. He was sitting reading his novel when suddenly Hannah landed next to him. Alan raised his head and greeted the student with a serious face. She asked why her brother was so serious. The girl was worried that it was because of her. Maybe she caused him a lot of trouble. But the thing was different. Alan said that he had just learned something very important. The sweet girl looked at the mentor and asked what he had learned. A stern Alan replied that the new issue of Sister Sue comes out the day after tomorrow. He overheard a conversation between two monks who were complaining about the demon clan. Because of them, they would have to travel all the way to Yun City and stand there all night for the new release. So tomorrow Alan has to leave for Yun, so there will only be one lesson. He hid his book and asked Sister Hannah to attack him with all her might. The girl was surprised, because if she tried so hard, the guy's house wouldn't be able to handle it. Brother Alan smiled and replied that the girl need not worry because she would not have the strength to do it. This answer excited the best student, and she prepared to show her power. The fire of rage burned in her eyes. Now she would show everything she was capable of to the new teacher. The girl released the maximum energy from her sword and directed it into the air, calling upon the heavenly heights. All the blue energy gathered into one huge clot of chakra and rushed towards Alan. It seemed that such power could not be contained, but suddenly there was a bang, and the entire clot seemed to burst. Hannah was in shock. All the power she had summoned dissolved before Alan's hand. Then the remains of her chakra simply flew into the sky, dissolving there completely. Meanwhile, Alan looked pathetically at the girl, demonstrating to her what he was really capable of. Hannah was stunned, her eyes wide and her mouth hanging open in shock. Feeling helpless, the girl fell to her knees. She could not believe that she had lost. Alan looked at the lost beauty and said that this world was far from ideal, as was her technology. The hero just found a flaw in her and destroyed it with the help of spiritual power. The girl needs to continue working on the shortcomings of her techniques. And when she starts doing this, there will be no limit to her skill. If Hannah can manage to overcome this, then the barriers will cease to exist for her. The disappointed girl bared her teeth as she had joined the clan over 20 years ago. She trained hard every day and even became the best student of the clan. But she didn't even dare think about what Alan had told her today. Suddenly, the boy sharply moved his foot across the tiles and asked his sister to look at him. He kicked one of the stones and it flew into the air with ease. In flight, Alan struck the center of the stone with his hand many times. The stone fell into the guy's hand, and he told Hannah to look at the marks left by the sword on this stone. This should help her level up. Then he threw the stone into the girl's hands, and she deftly caught it. Right in the center of the stone was written one word: sword. Alan also said that the girl should remember that this is his gift to her and no one else should see it. The beauty agreed. She jumped up and thanked her brother for the advice, and now it was time for the girl to return to training. Alan watched Hannah disappear into the night, surprised that she trained all night. However, the best student was too stubborn, and the hero was worried about her health. After training, the lazy man returned to bed, and soon morning came. Running his hand over his collection of novels, Alan decided it was time to move on. Suddenly, he felt a familiar energy and turned to look. In the sky, early in the morning, someone was heading somewhere. It was Master Alan, who, to his surprise, had also left the temple that morning. Meanwhile, the master, who was moving at the speed of light, noticed something strange. He stopped and told the stranger that he had been there for quite a while and was wondering if he was tired of waiting. In front of him stood the lord of the demon clan, who was curious whether the master's strength was as great as they said. But it seems he came in vain. At that moment, the face of an unknown villain appeared. It was the head of the demon clan, Dustin, and the master recognized him immediately. Uther, Alan's master, asked how the leader of the demons knew he was there. Dustin replied that perhaps someone told him about it. The master immediately realized that this meant that there was a spy in their clan. He was interested in what the demons were planning. Dustin laughed and replied that their goal was the same as always, and it was time for them to stop putting things off. The demon lord knew that ever since the Sword Clan learned of their plan, they had been secretly gathering a coalition, and he guessed that everything was already ready. Uther took out his sword and said that Dustin was a pretty self-confident guy. However, his overconfidence would drag him to the grave. After these words, the master summoned hundreds of energy swords, which rushed towards the enemy. Dustin's eyes lit up with a blood-red glow, and he replied that if that day came, he would accept it with dignity, but that day was not today. He wanted to see if Uther had gathered enough strength to withstand his attack. Meanwhile, in the city of Yun, everything was quiet and calm. Alan was already rushing to the sale of his favorite novel. He got to the city pretty quickly, and now he needs to look around to figure out where the meeting will take place. But suddenly he felt a strong pressure. The boy felt the beam of sword energy hidden in his master's jade pendant activate. The master is at the first level of ascension to the truth, and no one can compare to his sword technique, yet he may be in such danger. Was he really facing an opponent so powerful that he could defeat him? Meanwhile, the bloodied Uther was held by Dustin, who told him that this attack was too weak for him. But the demon leader was surprised that the sword's energy actually helped hold back his attack. The energy hidden in this cracked jade pendant. Opening his eyes, Uther remembered that this pendant was given to him by his student Alan. In his memoirs, Alan told the master that this pendant was his gratitude for taking care of him. Smiling, the guy said that this was just a small manifestation of concern. Dustin swung a second time and said it was time to die. He wouldn't miss a second time. Meanwhile, Alan opened the strange seal on his chest and said that these powers should be enough. He began to concentrate his energy, and circles like ripples on water gradually emerged from his head. The circles grew larger and larger. The almighty lazy man was looking for his goal. Dustin felt something wrong happening behind him and turned around. Alan summoned his sword technique, a space-cutting beam. At that moment, a huge beam of energy appeared above Dustin's head, like a divine pillar of electricity, and it was directed straight at him. The blow hit its target. Exhausted after such a powerful attack, Dustin thought that this technique belonged to Master Reynold. He held a scrap of Uther's clothing in his hand. His opponent had disappeared. Dustin was furious and swore that their next meeting would be his last. After some time, Alan was already there. The guy understood that he had hit the target. However, it didn't help. His opponent's strength was probably much higher than the level of the Purple Palace. But why did someone from the Demon Clan need to kill his master? Luckily, Master Uther managed to escape and Alan was already rushing back. The hero returned to the city where his book was sold. The guy thought that upon returning home, he would need to visit the master. The guy looked down and was surprised that the city was quite crowded today. All these people were standing in line for the ceremony in honor of the release of the new volume of The Crazy Journey of the Immortal. Alan didn't think it would turn out this way, but he had no choice but to stand and wait. Evening came, the line gradually shortened, and suddenly the seller said that there was only one copy left. The residents were indignant, but Alan was happy with his success, because now it was his turn. He reached out his hand for the coveted reward. Apparently, luck was on his side today. But suddenly someone's hand also reached for the book. Next to Alan stood a gorgeous girl with blue eyes and wearing a pink dress. She looked at the guy seductively and innocently. But the hero was not so simple. He put his hand on the book and did not want to give it up. Then the girl turned on all her charm and sense of smell, asking this handsome man to give her the last copy. But Alan did not give in and rudely refused the girl. Then she offered to pay him twice as much for the book. Her gaze became stern, and she said that it was a great deal. There was no point in refusing a luxurious lady. Nobody wanted to give in. The hero and the girl shouted to the seller that they needed this book. The sellers didn't know what to do when they saw the angry customers, so they asked them to calm down. There was one last copy left, and they needed to come up with something to divide it up, and then the girl had an idea. She said that since Alan doesn't want to give in to her, he should act according to his conscience. The hero asked what the girl meant. Cards with images of hands appeared in her hand, and the girl suggested playing rock, paper, scissors. Alan expressed doubts, saying that it was very easy to cheat in this game, to which the girl replied that she had personally created it and that these cards were capable of reproducing a person's thoughts, so there was no way to cheat. They can use this to achieve justice. The guy agreed that it would really be difficult to cheat. It all seemed quite reasonable, and in the end they decided to play. Alan's opponent offered to play until 3 victories, and the hero agreed to this condition. He decided to choose scissors in the first round to test everything. The girl gave the countdown. After she counted to 3, they placed the cards on the table. She invited the sellers to turn over the first round of cards. The sellers turned over the cards, and a disappointed Alan saw that he had lost. The girl was happy about her victory, and the guy was trying to figure out whether she had cheated or was just lucky. The second round began, and this time the guy was not going to lose. To prevent her from cheating, Alan decided to turn over the cards himself. Turning it over, he saw that he had scissors, and the girl had a stone. Alan's eyes were filled with disappointment. One more loss, and he would lose his treasured book. But the girl won another round. She mocked him by tossing her cards in her hand. Apparently, she was lucky today. Alan could hardly stand on his feet, realizing his failure, and the sellers said that if he was ill, they could contact someone from his clan to pick him up. He tried to find out where the girl had cheated, but everything was clear. The guy had wasted so much effort, and his book had gone to another buyer. But nothing can be done about it. The hero decided to return home. His tea leaves are about to ripen. He needs to prepare a new batch for the head of the clan. After walking around the market, Alan still didn't find any new seeds for tea. Now he has nothing to do here. It's time to go home. Flying over the city, Alan suddenly heard the swearing of passers-by who were shouting that the girl had deceived them. They asked the scammer to return their elixir to them. She in turn said that she was just lucky, to which the guys replied that she couldn't be lucky 20 times in a row. It was the same girl who defeated the hero. She shouted that she was an honest person, but these 2 monks were hardly so. Apparently heaven was punishing them for all the bad things they had done in their lives. The guys were sure that the girl was a liar, so she decided to escape from the crime scene in time. But the monks were not going to give up, and one of them decided to use his golden energy. In an instant, a golden hand appeared above the girl, and she realized that this energy was at the level of the Purple Palace. Suddenly, she saw Alan and started waving at him, getting his attention. The girl asked the guy to help her, and 2 monks asked the hero who he was. Alan was outraged that the beauty was asking for help, complaining that these 2 monks wanted to beat her because she had recently taken his book. The monks became wary, but the hero folded his hands in a sign of peace and said that he didn't really know the girl, so he wouldn't interfere in their squabble. The girl shouted that Alan was heartless. She asked if he had forgotten their first meeting. It was the hero who remembered her. They played a strange game, and he lost. The monks realized that apparently this girl wasn't the only one who had deceived them. They would have to teach her a lesson. Alan, meanwhile, was only thinking that if he didn't interfere in the affairs of this couple, he would be able to get his romance back. But the girl wasn't happy with this arrangement. She picked up the book and shouted that if the guy didn't help her right now, she would tear it into small pieces. The monks asked why she was yelling. After something like that, she wouldn't get away with it. The guy summoned his chakra, and in an instant it formed in the form of a golden hand. But suddenly his chakra was dissolved by a column of blue energy. Alan stood up to protect the girl, a blue aura shining around him, protecting him. The monk experienced a strange effect. It seemed that his powers were blocked, but the stranger said that he would not help the girl, so why did he stand up for her now? Alan apologized to them. He said that his plans had changed and asked for his understanding. Then the indignant hero turned to the swindler and asked her to give him the book. But the girl had no intention of doing this. She thanked the naive guy and used one of her abilities. At that very second, the girl dissolved into thin air, leaving behind only a blue silhouette of energy. But Alan wasn't going to let her go just like that. He caught the rest of her chakra. The guy smiled menacingly. She wouldn't be able to get away from him so easily. Catching the remnants of chakra, Alan jumped after the criminal. The monks who were watching this felt the eerie energy of the guy. They wanted to know what clan he was from. Suddenly, the second monk remembered that their treasures were still with that lady, and they needed to return them. Meanwhile, the cunning girl appeared outside the city. She was glad that she had not been training for so long in vain. But suddenly, she felt a strong pressure on herself, and someone was next to her. The formidable Alan appeared right in front of the girl and asked how she dared to lie to him. He directed 2 of his energy strikes at the girl's chest. Suddenly, she felt that she could no longer levitate. Alan had blocked all her powers. The hero managed to catch her. Looking at the criminal, he menacingly asked what clan she was from. Alan said that the girl's lies would not be allowed to go unpunished. According to the law of powers, her spiritual power must be sealed, and she must be reduced to a commoner who would have to clean pig pens for a whole week. The girl imagined herself digging in the mud with pigs, and this terrible punishment frightened the exhausted beauty. She kicked her legs and tried to break free. At that moment, 2 monks whom the girl had robbed flew past the couple. The beauty asked to let her go, but Alan said that he would not let her go until she gave him the book. Then the girl said that he would be alone for the rest of his life if he continued to read such novels. But she had no choice. The swindler took a book out of her pocket and handed it to Alan in exchange for her powers. Alan did just that. He restored the girl's strength and threw her the spirit stone. But he was genuinely curious as to how she had managed to cheat so cleverly. The girl was indignant and said that she had not cheated or deceived anyone. She just took advantage of a little illusion. The monks who heard this were outraged, because this was a scam. Alan asked what illusion the girl had used. She took the card, and at one moment there was a stone on it. Then the girl turned it over, and instead of a stone, there were scissors. The monk said that such an illusion does not reveal even half of the real forces. Quite clever, it is not surprising that they lost. With the help of this illusion, you can rig round after round for your own benefit. Alan remembered that when they were competing, he took the initiative to turn over the girl's cards, which is how she managed to win, since she can't change his cards during the game. The girl replied that this was a simple cognitive modification. While he thought he had lost, the picture before his eyes would change as she needed. Cognitive modification is an advanced method of illusion that incorporates the laws of cause and effect, which is what makes the method effective. The stunned monk asked the girl who she was. The beauty struck a pose and introduced herself. Her name is Lisa, and she is from the Palace of Heavenly Illusions. One of the monks asked his comrade what kind of power this heavenly palace possesses. He replied that it is a famous ancient clan that voluntarily isolates itself from others. They do not enter into alliances, but their power should not be underestimated. The monks bowed their heads and asked Lisa's forgiveness for not recognizing her. To the girl's surprise, they allowed her to keep the thing she had taken from them. Moreover, the monk asked her to go with them on a treasure hunt, since her illusions would be very useful if they encountered danger. Hearing the words about treasures, the girl immediately became inspired. She loved everything valuable and shiny. The monk explained that a few days ago, a red beam of light appeared deep in the Yun mountain range, filling the air with energy. It was likely that some rare treasure could be found there. Alan, hearing these words, became interested, because it could be that very demon. The monk continued his story, saying that this ridge was winding and long, but he knew the approximate route, so they could go there together. If there were a lot of treasures, they would divide them among themselves, and if there was only one, they would use them in turns. Alan wondered, the red beam a few days ago, if this was really the thing he was thinking about. However, the guy decided that it was useless to think because it could be a simple coincidence. Sister Lisa happily agreed to go with the monks in search of treasure. The monk also suggested that Brother Alan go with them because he was a strong fighter and there might be a rare and powerful treasure hidden there that would interest him. But Alan waved his hand dismissively and said that he wasn't interested in it and didn't want to waste his vacation on it. He wanted to take advantage of this time to have a good rest and read a new volume of the story. After these words, the guy left. Lisa got angry and said that he had ruined everything, but she was sure that the hero would return to them. Meanwhile, somewhere in the forest, a bloody aura was gathering around a familiar halberd. Traveling Howard was delighted with the find. He had finally found it. Finally, he found the very devil fruit that his master had spoken of. Lisa and her new companions set out in search of adventure, and their first challenge was a ferocious lion-like creature. The creature, overflowing with power, jumped towards the brave girl. He swung his paw and hit Lisa, but her upper body immediately disappeared. The beast was confused. The girl used her illusion and jumped into the air. The bait worked. Meanwhile, one of the monks at that moment began to use golden mist. The enraged beast turned around, sensing danger. But it was too late. The monk struck his opponent using one of his abilities. It was called 9 Misty Vortices. The exhausted creature fell dead to the ground. The monk praised Lisa, saying that her power of illusion was simply incredible, thanks to which they were able to easily defeat such a formidable opponent. Another comrade also praised the girl, saying that even if they encountered a top-level beast, they would be able to deal with it in no time. Lisa was a little embarrassed, but she liked the praise directed at her. But it was necessary to move further. Our heroes went deep into the dense forest. Lisa was already tired of walking. She said that half an hour had already passed since they left the mountain range. Were the guys sure that the treasure even existed? The monk calmed the girl down, telling her not to worry, because if he was not mistaken, then the goal was not that far away. Meanwhile, Howard began his ritual, commanding the demonic spear to absorb the energy. If everything goes according to the demon's plan, he will be able to get it out in a few hours. The villain was looking forward to this moment. As soon as he gets the fruit, the master will be pleased. But suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by a magical aura that he felt. Howard turned around, realizing that someone was approaching him right now. Yungshin clan disciples and a girl walking in his direction. This wasn't part of his plan. If they found the devil fruit and notified their clan, there would be trouble. The level of these three is not very high, so Howard was confident that he could deal with them with the help of blood puppets. He took out of his pocket one of the 3 bell-like artifacts that the Lord had given him and rang it. At that very moment, the ringing of the bell began to form a demonic gate. Howard laughed. It would be better if these travelers ran away from him. An unknown substance appeared, and Howard told her that he would stay here to protect the fetus. And the unknown creature that appeared must lead these 3 uninvited guests to him. The creature, enveloped in a purple aura, understood the order and instantly rushed after its target. While observing the artifact, Howard said that he was not in a position to leave behind 3 corpses. Meanwhile, Alan returned to Yun City because it was already too late, and he doesn't work overtime. The guy was sitting in one of the taverns, drinking aromatic tea and reading a long-awaited book. Before he knew it, he had almost finished reading the book. Finally, the killer whose identity had been hidden all this time was about to be revealed. Alan eagerly turned the page. Here it was, the secret the boy wanted to know. His eyes sparkled. But there was only a drawing of the face of a familiar girl and an inscription saying that she would not tell him who the killer was. Alan's disappointment knew no bounds. Lisa had ruined the moment by replacing the last page. He started screaming at the top of his lungs. The guy couldn't believe that the book would end at that moment. His screams made the earth shake, and the people in the tavern thought it was an earthquake. Suddenly they saw a blue beam in the sky, which rushed past them like a star. Enraged, Alan raced towards his goal, vowing to find it even if he had to destroy the entire mountain range. Meanwhile, the team of adventurers went deeper and deeper into the forest and began to notice a strange situation around them. Besides, for some reason Lisa felt like someone was watching her right now. The monk who was leading the squad turned around abruptly and shouted that something was wrong here, that something was moving towards them. At that moment, purple lightning struck the guy and blood poured out of his mouth. Lisa and the second monk screamed when they saw this terrible sight. The monk fell to the ground. his brother grabbed his partner and began trying to bring him back to consciousness. Lisa noticed something approaching the still-living guy and tried to warn him, but he didn't have time to react in time. Now 2 monks were lying on the ground unconscious. Lisa trembled, asking who was there. Stuttering, the girl asked the creature to appear. At that very second, a person, as fast as dark lightning, appeared behind her. Lisa felt a powerful blow to her neck and immediately lost consciousness. Alan felt something strange. An explosion of spiritual power just appeared next to him. But suddenly he disappeared somewhere in the depths of the forest as quickly as he appeared. The guy walked forward surprisingly, but there were no traces of the battle here, as if everything had disappeared or someone knew how to cover their tracks. The hero used his sensory ability, and at that moment, he felt that there was something in the air. The dark entity was about to attack the guy, approaching him from behind. But Alan, who was standing motionless, suddenly opened his eyes and stopped the attacker. The dark blade, almost touching the hero's neck, stopped. Alan asked the creature who he was and what he was trying to do. The purple aura dissipated, and inside it, Alan saw a cute little girl holding a needle with trembling hands. Feeling a terrible aura in front of her, the girl suddenly began to cry. Alan assumed that she couldn't speak and asked about it. The sweet creature nodded her head. The hero asked if the 3 guys who fought with her were still alive or not, and the girl nodded her head affirmatively again. Suddenly the guy became stern and told the creature to take him to them, and then he would not punish her. The creature was about to agree, when suddenly they heard the ringing of a bell coming from the depths of the forest. The little girl grabbed her head, feeling a dark pressure on herself. Crying, the girl flew towards the bell, which greatly surprised Alan. The hero immediately realized that this was a soul control bell. The master told him that it was a kind of witchcraft that seals the soul of a living person into a bell, placing a curse on him. Apparently the demon clan was involved here too. Meanwhile, the demonic spear was gathering energy around itself. Howard, who was ringing the bell, looked at the 3 captives from whom the power was being pumped out and told the girl who had arrived that she had so much time, but she still could not capture another person. The demon called the baby useless trash and placed his foot on her tiny body. The girl was crying on the ground, and the demon elder was saying that there was no way she could escape from him. If she tries to escape, Howard will do everything to turn her life into such a nightmare that she herself will beg him for death. Suddenly, an unknown voice from the aura cloud asked where that guy was now, since he came here for him. And besides, why did Howard call him if he said he could handle it himself? But they didn't have to look for the guy for long. He was already right above their heads and said that it would take just a couple of days to repair such damage. They definitely couldn't have done it without outside help. The demon elder immediately recognized the scoundrel who had defeated him last time, which is why he had to humiliate himself before his master and spend a long time healing his wounds. Howard didn't wait long and immediately attacked his sworn enemy, sending a demonic clot of energy in his direction that looked like a skeleton's skull. But Alan, as always, easily repelled the elder's attack by simply dispersing the villainous energy. He smiled, mocking his opponent, and said that he did not understand how Howard was still holding on with such strength. The demon's rage was boiling more and more. Alan was irritating with his composure. He grabbed the bell and ordered Gwyneth to quickly kill the vile insect. But Alan, with a quick movement of his blade, cut off the demon's hand that was holding the bell. The hero approached the little girl. Now he knew her name. Her name was Gwyneth. The guy attacked the ancient artifact with his energy, and it immediately shattered into small pieces. He told the sobbing little girl that she no longer had to be the demon's puppet. Now the girl is free and can do whatever she wants, and these words made her eyes fill with even more tears. The girl flew sharply towards Alan, but Howard ordered her to stop. Gwyneth immediately fell to the ground, the demon saying that even without the bell, she could not disobey his orders. The villain tried to tell her what would happen to her if she disobeyed, but at that moment he shut up because he got hit on the head by a little girl. After the blow, a frightened Gwyneth immediately threw herself into Alan's arms. The boy stroked the crying girl's head and told her that she could now return home. And she doesn't have to worry, the hero here will figure everything out himself. This is coercion and exploitation of labor. He himself understood all this perfectly well, because he was once in exactly the same situation. Howard wasn't about to give up. He stood up and punched the ground, summoning the blood hell technique. At that very second, a bloody aura began to burst from his hands, and inside of it, many eyes appeared. A huge hand appeared from the bloody hell, and a voice was heard from inside, asking who dared to challenge his master. a huge demon appeared from the dark portal, and Howard ordered it to kill the monk immediately. The monster understood the order, swung at the hero, and shouted that this guy was just a small pawn, and his master shouldn't dirty his hands with such trash. Sharp blades of bloody energy rushed towards Alan to kill him, but he drew his sword from its sheath. At that moment, a huge pillar of the guy's aura struck the sky and blocked the demon's attack. The creature was surprised by the boy's strength, but it was a pity that because of his seal, the demon could only show 1/5 of his strength. The monster shouted that one day he would return and there would be a glorious battle between them, but for now, the guy could only remember his name. The monster wanted to say its name, but before it could finish, it burst due to Alan's multiple cuts. Gwyneth hid behind the guy and was shocked by what she saw, and Alan only sighed in disappointment. Howard was horrified that a mere mortal could defeat such a powerful demon. However, that was not all. Alan was not going to just let the impudent elder go this time. The boy concentrated his powerful strength in his fingers, creating a blade of energy. Howard realized that this was the end for him and began to beg the guy to stop and wait a little. But before he could finish speaking, a powerful stream of mana created by Alan passed through him. Then there was an explosion, and the guy turned around and said that he didn't need to wait. Suddenly, Alan saw his still shackled comrades, among whom was the girl who had stolen his treasured page. He sent a small portion of his chakra into the girl to wake her up. At that very second, Lisa opened her eyes and gradually began to come to her senses. She immediately recognized the guy and panicked, but Alan hastened to calm her down, saying that she had spent too much spiritual power and needed to rest, then he would help her get to the city. But suddenly a scarlet light shone behind Alan, which did not bode well. The battle was not yet over, because the bloody halberd began to rise and whirlwinds began to swirl around it. Suddenly, Lloyd appeared among the gathered energy, telling Alan that he was one step away from killing the master. The hero actually forced him to sacrifice his last magical weapon. And now the only thing Lloyd so fiercely desires is Alan's death. The lazy man sighed in disappointment. He was about to have another fight with the madman. He turned around and pointed his hand at the demon, saying that he didn't understand what was happening to him, but if one sword wasn't enough for him, he would use another. After these words, Alan released a powerful stream of energy, which rushed towards the enemy like a destructive wave. But this time, Lloyd was able to repel the hero's attack by shouting that he was now much more powerful than his opponent. The villain counterattacked, directing his bloody aura at the hero in the form of a demonic mask. The boy realized that it was too dangerous to leave his allies here and threw them away with his power. He then tried to block the enemy's attack with his weapon, which he usually managed to do easily. But this time something went wrong, and Alan even moved back a little from such force. The hero couldn't believe that just now the monster was on the 7th level of the Purple Palace, but now he was already on the 2nd level of ascent to the truth. The guy looked closer and saw a strange scarlet stone on Lloyd's forehead. Now everything became clear. This thing on the forehead is an ancient forgotten treasure, the amber of the harvest. Lloyd smiled. He expected nothing less from the disciple of the swordsman clan. The boy was able to recognize the artifact. According to ancient legends, tens of millions of years ago, someone picked up this stone and by activating it, greatly increased their spiritual level and became a powerful ruler. But after just 5 years, all their life force was exhausted and they died, cursing the treasure. From that very moment, anyone who came into contact with Harvest Amber could not expect any other fate. Alan said that although he does not know how this ancient treasure ended up in Lloyd's possession, everything in this world must obey one law of force. Therefore, this power, like any power, must have its price. The guy threw the mirror at the demon's feet. He suggested that the elder look at himself in the mirror and understand what he had become and stop harboring false illusions. Lloyd looked in the mirror and saw a decrepit old man there. The demon could not believe his eyes because he was supposed to be at least 800 years old. In a rage, the master broke the mirror and asked why he looked like that. Alan explained that this treasure is a demon that sucks all the life force out of him. Lloyd went crazy. He laughed and said that if he returned what he owed, then his master would definitely give him an elixir that would restore his vitality. If he used this stone wisely, then the whole world would fall at his feet. Alan realized that the villain had gone crazy and prepared his sword. Apparently the stone had completely brainwashed him. The enraged demon shouted at the hero to close his mouth, and at that moment bit his finger until it bled. He then applied his blood to the stone, completing his ritual. The demon's power increased, and scarlet tongues of flame flew around him. He became stronger and stronger. Gathering all his new power, he fired a blood tornado at the mighty hero. Alan used a sword strike to stop the furious attack. But suddenly it didn't work. The demon's power was colossal, and now Alan couldn't block his blows. It was now obvious that Lloyd had not reached the second level of Truth Ascension, but the fifth level, and was on par with the head of the Sword Clan, Reynold. The wounded Alan fell to his knee, trying to catch his breath after such an attack. But he had his own trump card. The guy lowered his robe, and a secret seal appeared on his chest. Lloyd wanted to attack the guy, but suddenly a golden whirlwind enveloped the villain, which he had to dodge. It was Gwyneth who came to Alan's aid and tried to somehow detain the villain. The furious demon attacked the little spirit, shouting that it was in vain that she rebelled against him. But our hero managed to stop the bloody beam in time, telling Gwyneth that he told her to leave, and that's why she came back. Lloyd didn't stop. Taking advantage of the pause, he tried to attack the guy with his spear. Alan looked at his seal and thought it was too late. The spear hit its target, but suddenly Alan simply melted into thin air like smoke. The old man couldn't believe his eyes as he simply disappeared into thin air. But the answer appeared on its own. The villain looked up and saw Lisa there, who was using one of her abilities on Alan. The enraged demon used his hellish fangs, pointing them at the girl. Her illusion wouldn't work a second time. Suddenly, a powerful stream of force struck the sky, dispersing all the bloody energy in the area. The rescued Lisa looked at the powerful column of energy and could not believe her eyes. In the center of the stream was a transformed Alan. Now the real battle would begin. The hero awakened his power, his eyes turned blue, and the seal released some of his energy. In this guise, Alan looked like a demigod, and not like an ordinary lazy loser. But that didn't stop Lloyd. He decided that the guy chose death instead of just running away. With the speed of a cheetah, he attacked Alan, but he blocked the halberd attack with one movement of his hand. Lloyd couldn't believe his eyes. It was impossible for an ordinary mortal to resist such power. Besides Lloyd, there was also Lisa, who did not believe what was happening. Could Alan really be that strong? The demigod said that a drop of his spiritual power would be enough to deal with the demon. The demon elder began to tremble, but still did not give up. It wasn't fear. It was a trembling of rage. Lloyd shouted that the hero didn't dare insult him and gathered his bloody energy. But Alan didn't care, because the great lazy man was sure that the demon lost when he removed the seal. He took out his sword, and in an instant, a huge golden dragon, made of divine energy, appeared behind the hero. The monster growled as it advanced towards Lloyd. The powerful pressure felt even at a great distance from such a powerful force. The monster was colossal in size, and Lloyd's energy was no match for it. It couldn't be stopped. In an instant, divine energy passed through the demon elder, dispelling all of his bloody energy. The blow was so powerful that Lloyd dissolved into thin air, like ashes from paper thrown onto a fire. The divine power rushed back into Alan's seal, and when it returned completely, he calmly buttoned his robe. All that was left of Lloyd was the harvest amber and the blood spear, and Lisa was surprised that Alan had returned to his previous level. But then her gaze fell on the ancient treasure that was hovering in the air. The girl's gaze turned purple. The stone seemed very beautiful to her. The amber of the harvest beckoned to the girl. She came closer and closer, and when she found herself too close, she extended her hand to it. Suddenly, Alan appeared behind her and whispered to her that she shouldn't do this. He summoned a bag into which he put some of his power and began to seal the demonic artifact. Only now did Lisa realize that the stone had bewitched her, and she felt uneasy about it. Alan explained that this thing is extremely dangerous. You need to be careful with it, otherwise you can lose your life like Lloyd. Then a cute little spirit of Gwyneth appeared, protected by the hero. Lisa recognized the offender. She pointed at Gwyneth and shouted that it was she who attacked them. Because of this, the little girl began to cry guiltily. Alan, who was holding Lisa back, said that the girl's name was Gwyneth and that she didn't want to offend them. She was simply obeying the soul bell. Lisa asked the guy what happened to the bell now, to which he replied that he destroyed it. So now Gwyneth is safe and can leave without any problems. He asked the girl to be careful and not to get caught by bad guys again. Watching the spirit and the guy say goodbye, Lisa said that the girl was quite strong and Alan could keep her for himself, to which the guy replied that he was not like these demons. Lisa turned away, saying that the bad guy used her as a weapon thanks to the soul bell. The beauty thought for a moment and decided that she had been mistaken about the hero. Alan replied that since she was wrong, Lisa could return the page she had torn out to him, and the girl was outraged that this fool was only concerned about a stupid novel. But there was no need to argue with him, so Lisa gave him the last page. The hero was barely embarrassed when he saw that very last page. But deciding to leave it for later, he hid it in his robe, thanking the girl and saying that no one should know about what she saw. Lisa didn't understand why the guy was doing this, because killing the elder of the demon clan was a great achievement, and he could become famous. Alan poked her in the forehead and told the girl not to ask unnecessary questions, but to simply accept it as a fact. The beauty understood that the last question remained, what to do with this spear, and Alan had an answer. He would simply take it with him and dispose of it. He also asked Lisa to take care of those guys while he went first with this thing, to which the girl got angry and said that she was not a nanny. The guy reached out his hand to the spear to take it, when suddenly a huge hand of incomprehensible power appeared from space. A voice from space shouted that he would not allow the bloody halberd to be taken away, and grabbed the artifact, dragging it along with him. A second later, the monster disappeared, which was quite unusual. Lisa was trembling from such a strong aura. She asked what it was. Alan answered that it was probably another elder. The girl asked if the guy was going to follow him, since that weapon was probably valuable, to which the guy replied that firstly, the unknown person was too strong, and it would be difficult to deal with him, and secondly, he didn't really care about disposing of this artifact. Well, thirdly, Alan is now on legal vacation, so it's time for him to leave, because he needs to return as soon as possible and find out how the novel ended, the hero hoped. The hero said goodbye and hoped that he would meet Lisa again. After these words, the guy quickly ran away, leaving the girl confused. She stuck her tongue out at him as a farewell, saying that she didn't need him to meet with her again, since so many bad things had happened since their first meeting with the beauty. But if you think about it, Alan has incredible strength, a good character, and he has a pretty face. Lisa thought she shouldn't think about that, because the guy had left to deal with the consequences of what had happened, but at their next meeting. By morning, Lisa woke up the monks, the girl slapped each guy, and they immediately woke up. The monks didn't understand what had happened. The head of the demons had disappeared somewhere, and Lisa was sitting in front of them without a single scratch. The girl saw the questioning faces of the guys and decided to tell them everything. After a few minutes of stories, one of the monks was horrified to learn that the treasure was a weapon of the demon clan, which meant that Lisa and Alan saved them from death. Lisa confirmed the guy's words, adding that they were lucky because the elder died from exhaustion of spiritual energy. The monk asked where Mr. Allen was. He was worried because they didn't even thank him for saving him. "Brother, shouldn't the grand gathering be about to begin? Given his strength, Master Allen will surely be there as his clan's representative." "Indeed, we will be able to thank him there," the monk replied, surprising Lisa. The girl became interested in what kind of meeting would be held, when and where it would be. The monk scratched his head and said that it was not surprising that the girl knew nothing about the meeting, since their city was isolated from the rest of the world. Most of the clans from the east are part of the alliance, and every 10 years they send a representative to Tianjiao. During this meeting, the ranking of each clan is determined. This is called the Great Meeting in Tianzhao. Moreover, the place in the ranking in the future influences the distribution of resources between clans. Lisa understood everything. She assumed that she could also come there. The monk answered the girl that, given the reputation of her clan, it was quite possible. The cunning girl smiled and thought that if she went there, she would have the opportunity to fight that guy. Her gaze was cunning, and the girl decided that it was time for her to return. Meanwhile, Alan was already hurrying home, flying over the mountains. He thought about the past battles. That man, what happened to him? Casting such a spell requires extraordinary skill and great spiritual power. His power is very great. If I don't destroy the seal by at least a third, I'm definitely not his opponent. But most likely this will have to be done, because the demon clan took up the matter and dared to attack even the master. They probably need that demonic halberd for a reason. Even if I try to get the weapons back, it will surely lead to a large number of attacks and a major crisis. I am counting on the help of the elders of my clan, and I can also contribute to solving this problem. Suddenly, the guy felt a strange aura in the breath of wind. He stopped and asked the entity why it had come, and at that very second, a golden whirlwind formed behind him. To the guy's surprise, Gwyneth appeared from the golden whirlwind and crashed into the hero's chest. Looking at the child's tear-stained eyes, Alan realized that she simply had nowhere to go, and she wanted to go with him. The hero said that she could join him, but if she wanted to leave in the future, she didn't have to ask permission. Upon hearing these words, the spirit of the little girl burst into tears and pressed herself closer to the guy in gratitude. Alan stroked her head calmingly. The hero did not expect that he would be able to get a magical companion for free. After heading home, the guy said it was great that from the outside Gwyneth's strength looked like the wind. It was an excellent conspiracy, and in the future, Alan promised to solve her speech problems. The spirit was slightly surprised by what was said, after which the guy decided that it was time to return to the clan. Flying up to the familiar mountains, the hero told Gwyneth that this place would now become her home. Meanwhile, in one of the palaces of the Swordsman clan, Reynold landed next to the girl, and in a panic, the head of the Swordsman clan began to ask what had happened to the master. A girl named Selena said that he had many fractures, damaged internal organs, and if they had hesitated even a little, no god could have saved him. Master Uther was sleeping in his bed. Selene used the divine pill. His life was saved. Reynolds' rage knew no bounds, and he vowed to make them answer for what they had done to the master. A little later, in a secret location of the Alliance, on the border of the Dark Moon, a meeting was held. The elder of the Purple Spirit clan, Ivar, the 4th level of Ascension to Truth, asked why Reynold had called them all together. Reynold began his speech. Ladies and gentlemen, it is no secret that the Demon clan has become very active in the last few days. As soon as I crossed the borders of the prefecture, he immediately attacked me. In addition, Dustin, the elder of the Demon clan, has been busy improving the Blood Demon warrior formation. I think each of us understands what this means. Although my clan's disciples were unable to retrieve the Devil Fruit, they did retrieve the Blood Soul Pearl. I instructed one of the masters to personally deliver it to the Alliance, but he was attacked by a Demon clan member, and the master himself was seriously injured. His spirit was also damaged. Ivar was horrified. Could Master Uther's injuries really be that severe? Few could match his skill. How could he have sustained such injuries? Master Reynold is right. The matter is indeed serious, said the elder of the Taishu clan named Henry, the 9th level of Ascension to Truth. The elder suggested that the demons have their own informant within the Alliance. From today on, I recommend that all elders conduct a thorough check among their disciples. It is necessary to prevent the impending disaster and get rid of the problem at its roots. If the Demon clan finds out about our intentions, I'm sure they won't sit idly by. Reynold was surprised that Master Henry agreed with his assumption. The man immediately stood up and shouted that he, as one of the elders, would willingly obey the master's order and personally carry out the inspection. Yungshin clan elder Cody, a 4th level Truth Ascension practitioner, added that just a few hours ago, news came from his clan's disciples. They met a Demon clan elder on the mountain ridge. He attacked them by stripping them of their spiritual power. Their lives were hanging by a thread, but the elder was weakened due to the ancient treasure sucking out all his life force, so a disciple of another clan and a guy named Alan joined forces to kill him. Reynold was very surprised when he heard the name of his weak and lazy student. The elder didn't understand what the guy was doing there. He was supposed to be on vacation. How did he end up there? Reynolds' reaction, Henry asked him if he knew the name. Reynold explained that there was a disciple with that name in his clan, but his level could not be that high. He must have just been helping. I'll question him when I get back. Suddenly, a blurry cosmic figure spoke up, the man saying that due to the increased activity of the Demon clan recently, they were forced to take action as soon as possible. It was the Starry Sky clan's elder, Silas, the 8th level of the Purple Palace. He said that some adjustments would need to be made to their regulations in order to encourage the interest of the disciples and clans. Ivar thought, since the Alliance's creation, the rules had only been revised 3 times. Is changing the charter now appropriate? Silas's hand, and he said that those gathered here could be sure of this. After all, he will not skimp on motivating his students. When the elders saw what he had created, they were amazed. Silas offered to use this as a reward. In his hand was a golden thing similar to a mysterious key. After some time, Alan returned to the clan's residence and decided to visit his master. He was holding a box and a small jug in his hand. The guy looked friendly and asked the master how he was feeling. Uther greeted his student. Thanks to Selena's care, he was feeling much better. He just needed a little time to recover. Alan, meanwhile, opened his box and replied that he was now calm. There were 2 lumps of greenery and a spoon in the box. The hero took the greens and, using a spoon, carefully poured them into a glass, telling the master that he had carefully grown these tea leaves. Then the guy added water from a small jug. This water was straight from the mine. Having brewed the tea, Alan handed it to the master, saying that a cup of this tea would definitely restore the teacher's spiritual strength. Alan came closer to the bed and asked Uther to drink it. He gladly accepted the gift. Taking 1 sip, the man felt a surge of strength, appreciating his student's tea. He then said that Alan should use the time he spends on plants for his own development, since his level is still too low. Among the students, Alan is perhaps at the lowest level. The teacher's words upset Alan, and he took up his old tricks again. This time, the hero decided to release some spiritual power. A blue aura surrounded Alan, and the boy informed Uther that he had recently risen to level 8. The master was surprised when he saw the power flying around the room. But then his gaze changed from joyful to indifferent. The angry teacher said that it had been 5 years since Alan's last breakthrough. Look at your sister. She trained hard to achieve her goal. Alan, in his usual manner, said that he would try his best, and the teacher asked him to stop making fun of him. As your teacher, I know that you don't like to hear about such trivial things. You probably didn't just visit me for no reason. Realizing the conversation was getting serious, Alan hurried to get out of there, but the master stopped him. The teacher said that he was wounded by one of the demon clan's people, and he almost died in that battle. But the jade pendant that Alan gave him protected him from the deadly attack. Then, there was a sudden flash of light that wounded the attacker and allowed Uther to escape. Alan, tell me the truth. Are you hiding something from me? Like your true level? Or maybe you sealed your true power so you wouldn't show it to us. Master, are you serious? Could I have hidden my level from you and the boss? That's also true. You're not very diligent. I don't think you could pull off something like that. But what about the jade pendant? Where did you get it? Uther asked, and Alan told him he found it in a treasure chest. I felt that it emitted an unusual aura, so I decided to give such a precious thing to the teacher. Uther smiled. You accidentally picked up a real treasure. This jade pendant probably contains the energy of a sword of incredible power. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be alive anymore. Alan even felt a little embarrassed at these words. It wasn't often that he heard the master praise him, but suddenly Uther called the boy, and he turned to face the teacher. At that very second, the master pointed his palm at the guy, trying to attack him. But right in front of the hero's face, he stopped his hand, and a frightened Alan asked the teacher what he was doing. In fact, Alan guessed that the teacher was testing him and did not evade. Uther laughed, saying that Alan's reactions weren't sharp enough for an 8th level. Alan confirmed the master's words, saying that he was still far from the master's skill. At that moment, a book appeared from his robe. A gust of wind shook her in her hero's robe, and the book fell right onto the bed. The master noticed the book and seemed to recognize it. Alan blushed and panicked. The teacher must not know what was inside this book. Uther tried to take the book, but Alan quickly snatched it away and said that it was just a small hobby. Suddenly, the master waved his hand, driving the guy away. He allowed him to go. Finally, he advised the hero to practice more and read less nonsense. This behavior surprised Alan. The teacher should have scolded him for it, but he didn't even pay attention. The master interrupted Alan's thoughts by asking when he would leave. The hero replied that he was leaving right now. As soon as the guy left the room, the master lifted the pillow under which lay that very book. Taking the novel, Uther said that he didn't think Alan would like the work he had written. Considering that this is a limited edition book, and also autographed, one can conclude that this is exactly what he spent his vacation on. Having hidden the book, the master decided that it was better for Alan not to know who its author was. The next day, Reynold gathered the leading elders of his clan. Standing in front of the 4 men, he announced that the rules of the alliance would be changed. Fenglin Hall named Mark told the head that they had already discussed this at the last meeting. Would they really do it? Yes, we need to test our students. The following changes were passed by a 7-3 vote. The first change is the introduction of a non-aggression rule, which guarantees the safety of each member of the alliance. The second change is the requirement for a written agreement to participate in the battle. And finally, there is a ban on revenge for someone who died in battle by his clan brothers and sisters. The Blue Moon Hall master named Frank said that all the students who participated in the competition were true geniuses, and their deaths would be a great loss. Reynold himself understood this. The master's concerns were not unfounded, but the attacks of the demon clan had become much more frequent. To cope with a possible crisis in the future, the younger generation must quickly learn from their experience. The Langston Hall named Kevin said that in fact, if anyone from the demon clan were to threaten the lives of the disciples, they would have to engage in direct confrontation. It is true, however, that it is better to face a crisis with a clear mind and decisive action. Everything else should not bother your minds, said the last master of the Liu Yun Hall, named Uther. Reynold said that Master Uther is right. Moreover, this time we plan to take first place. After all, the reward for first place will be the key to the Emperor's tomb. Upon hearing about the award, the masters were surprised. It was one of the most valuable relics. The Emperor was the first man who ascended to the truth 5 million years ago, and he left behind many treasures. His tomb was discovered in the sea area and required 5 key fragments to open it. Reynolds said that 4 of them had been found so far, but he couldn't even imagine who would end up with the last fragment, and if they could get it, they would be able to open the Emperor's tomb. That's why our clan must win. We must take first place. Reynolds announced that the selection of candidates will begin in a week. After some time, the guys on the street were discussing the announcement. This time the competition would be different from the previous ones. Not only talismans can be used, but also some forbidden knowledge. Some students considered this too dangerous. "It doesn't matter," said one of the students, "because all the heads and elders will gather there. I heard that the top 5 will receive worthy rewards, and they will be the ones to represent our clan at the great meeting. So what are we waiting for? We need to stock up quickly, or we'll be left with nothing left if we're late." The boys went to the store, and our lazy guy, who was sleeping under a tree, noticed that they were too nervous. Fortunately, he had prepared long ago. Suddenly, he heard a shrill voice behind him. It was Steve greeting his brother. Alan asked the boy what he wanted, and why Steve was here and not in the shop with the rest of the students. "Why would I need anything when I have the technique you taught me, brother?" Steve answered proudly. Alan laughed and said that one shouldn't be so careless. It often leads to defeat. But Steve believed that he could take first place. According to the rules, the top 3 would be able to challenge the special students, and, if they won, replace one of them. So the common students line up to challenge Alan, defeat the weak lazy guy, and take his place. The sly man wondered if it wouldn't be better to let himself be defeated and transfer back to the ordinary students, and then my responsibilities would be even less. Steve looked at his idol and admired him. There was not a drop of panic on his face. Everyone who underestimated him would pay for it. Suddenly, Uther's pendant lit up on Alan's belt, meaning that the master was looking for him. Alan told Steve to train hard while he went to visit the master. A few minutes later, the hero was already at his residence. Standing in front of the master, the hero asked why he was looking for him. Uther greeted the student and said that he had one requirement in view of the upcoming competition. The master said that the boy should not hold back his strength. He should be at least among the top 20 disciples of the clan. Alan shouted that it was absolutely impossible. In his head, he had already developed a plan on how he would become an ordinary student thanks to this opportunity. "There are 55 true disciples in our clan," said the master. "I am sure that entering the top 20 will not be difficult for you." But Alan did not agree with this, because if he was really strong, then his level would not be so low. Uther looked sternly at the boy and asked if he remembered why the master took him as an apprentice. "As your teacher, I still haven't forgotten the sword technique you used in the ring back then. Your strength is in no way inferior to that of a true disciple. You are capable of developing into a true master." Alan cursed that day. "I should have held back then. I didn't think that 10% of the force would cause such a wave of destruction." "Master, back then it was just an accident," the guy said. "Now even if I had to, I wouldn't be able to repeat it." "Do you want to refuse your favorite teacher?" "Master, but I really can't," Alan replied. "No one can stop him from becoming an ordinary student again." Suddenly, the teacher took out a pink book and put it on the table, asking if the boy really couldn't show his strength. Seeing a familiar book in the master's hands, Alan was a little embarrassed. Uther sent the book into the boy's hands, and the hero was surprised that the master could also read such things. The pages began to turn in Alan's hands, and he saw a signature on the last page, Author Uther. At that moment, the hero realized that the author of his favorite book was his master. Meanwhile, Uther took a stack of sheets of paper from his robe and said that this was the 12th volume, which was not yet on sale. But Alan still couldn't get over the shock. His favorite author had been with him all this time, and even turned out to be his master. But suddenly it dawned on the guy that if he wanted to get the new volume, he would have to do something for the master. Uther smirked and took the book from Alan's hands. Then the master said that the guy must enter the top 20, otherwise he will kill the main character in the next part. Alan couldn't believe his ears. She was his favorite character. "Master, how can you decide a character's fate so hastily? Don't you feel sorry for the fans?" But Uther was adamant. He said that the protagonist's older sister would marry another man. This information shocked Alan even more. The elder sister is his second favorite character. The master is too cruel. Alan decided to play a trick and asked his master if he was afraid that his student would tell the elder who the author of the novel was. Uther replied that if that happened, he would make sure that the hero's beloved died right before his eyes. The master wounded our hero without a knife. He could do nothing about the teacher's arguments. But if Alan makes it into the top 20, Uther promised to treat his favorite characters well, and he might even show him a small sketch and give him a couple of illustrated collector's editions. Alan found it hard to resist and had to say that he would try to win. The conversation ended, and Alan returned to his previous place where Steve was waiting for him. Alan's face showed tension. He put his hand on Steve's shoulder and said that the master was looking for him. Seeing that gloomy expression, Steve became scared. After some time, the boy came to the master, who said that Alan was too young to act as a mentor. Uther told the boy to go to the peak of Mount Jin and find their eternally missing person, Miss Hannah. She went back to self-improvement and missed all the latest news. The guy understood the order and immediately went to the mountain flying on his sword. Arriving at the place, Steve stood in front of the closed gates and began loudly calling the girl. But no one answered the guy. He thought that there was no one. Apparently his sister was really busy. Suddenly the door swung open with a powerful stream of blue chakra. The cutting wind literally blew away everything in its path, but Steve could barely stay on his feet. He immediately ran inside to check what had happened, and what he saw surprised him. There was a sign hanging in the sky, shrouded in a blue aura, and the guy became curious about what it was. Suddenly he felt a very strong aura land behind him, and a shudder ran through the guy's body. Hannah, enveloped in a scarlet aura, looked at the guy with a murderous gaze and asked what he was looking at. The boy, paralyzed with fear, slowly turned around and replied that he was not looking at anything. He had come to convey news of a great gathering. The girl was invited to take part in a competition within the clan. Hannah's expression immediately changed to that sweet girl, because she recognized the guy. It was Alan's brother's friend named Steve. She put her hand on the guy's shoulder and asked, "You didn't see anything like that just now, did you?" Frightened by the creepy girl, Steve replied that he hadn't seen anything at all. Hannah replied that she understood, and the guy could go. Steve didn't wait long, but immediately tried to get away from this creepy lady as quickly as possible. Hannah felt a little sad because she was so focused on training that she forgot about everything else. Brother Alan is really amazing. In recent days, the girl felt that she had become much stronger. Hannah remembered the puppets she had fought before, and which she had found difficult to defeat. If she fought them now, she would cut them into small pieces. "You need to devote more time to practice. Wait, Brother Alan. I will definitely catch up with you soon." Meanwhile, Alan cursed his master for daring to threaten him. In a normal battle, I would quickly reveal my true strength, but this time the rules are more flexible, so I can dump everything on the props, so if I win, they won't saddle me with new responsibilities. The hero collected all his accessories in a bag. With these things, he would definitely win a couple of rounds. Suddenly, his gaze fell on a rare red jade. The hero considered it an excellent option. The guy wanted to take the stone when suddenly a voice was heard from the jade, asking the guy to touch it, and then the stone would give him everything he wanted. "Pour your spiritual power into me, and I will give you luck that will reach the heavens. I will give you everything you can think of." But Alan stood motionless. Then the stone began to scream even louder and command the hero to touch it and pour spiritual energy into it. "Touch yourself! Get the hell out of here, or I'll break you!" Alan shouted and threw the stone on the ground. Suddenly, the jade came back and asked why he hadn't been able to seduce the guy in so many centuries. This was the first time he had encountered something like this. Alan replied that it was because the jade requirements looked like a pop-up spam window. Looking at the interesting creature, the hero began to think. He became interested in who this stone was. The Scarlet Stone said that he was a venerable lord, a demon of heaven, a great master. "What kind of great master is this? I've never heard of him." "Scoundrel, I came here with the devil himself. He left, and I remained. All the monks of the world must address me as lord." Alan replied that now everything was clear to him. Apparently, the stone had been thrown by his master. This phrase angered the demon. "How dare you insult me? Pour some spiritual energy into me, and I will show what I'm worth." "So that means you have some kind of secret," Alan said with interest, looking at the stone. "So, boy, do you dare touch me, or are you a coward after all?" Alan laughed and touched the jade with his finger. The hero said that it was a trifle for him and released his spiritual energy into the ominous stone. In the blink of an eye, he found himself in a heavenly jade void. Around the guy there was only space and purple lights that fell down like drops of rain. Wandering through the void, Alan suddenly felt something. Turning around, he saw huge purple eyes that mocked the fact that all people are fools. Alan answered the demon that he thought so, that he looked pathetic. He didn't even have his own body. "You impudent fellow, how dare a human trash like you talk to me, the great demon Mo-Zun, like that?" "You have a strange name," Alan replied. The demon explained that Mo is a race and Zun is a position. Mr. Mo-Zun is an honorary title. Alan yawned. It seemed too complicated for him. "Since your body is purple and you are a demon, just call yourself a purple demon." The great demon became angry and ordered Alan not to call him that. Okay, Purple Demon, the hero smiled back. Mozun told the guy that he wouldn't be acting so arrogantly for long. Did he really think that since he came here, he could do whatever he wanted? Alan asked how to leave here then. The demon answered that the first option is to get his permission, but this is not the case for the hero. The second is to bargain with the great demon. Wealth, beauty, land, status. What do you need? This proposal intrigued Alan. The hero's eyes sparkled, and he asked the demon to grant him 100 years of life. The demon replied that, unfortunately, he couldn't do that, and Alan became disappointed and called Mozui trash. You have no other wishes? The demon asked, and Alan paused again. In principle, I could get a couple of volumes of my favorite novel so that I could be the first to read them all. The demon asked what kind of novel it was, and Alan began looking for it in his robe. He took out a book with a pink cover and said that it was very popular and that his master had written it. Then who's supposed to grant your wish? The demon shouted, and the hero grew angry and replied that Mozui was worthless, unable to handle 2 trivial wishes. You, since you refuse to call me by my name and do not want to bargain, you will stay here forever. You will die in fear and hunger, your body will be completely destroyed, and also... Before the demon could finish speaking, a huge blue hand squeezed his face. Alan squeezed the entity tighter and tighter. He assumed that if he could touch the demon, he would be able to get out of here. You're going to crush me? Until you master the law of the great Tao, you won't be able to harm me, the demon laughed. But suddenly he felt his body begin to crack from a powerful grip. The demon couldn't believe what was happening, and Alan told him that it was an interesting coincidence. It just so happened that the guy wasn't so simple. After some time, Alan returned to his former place after escaping from prison. He held the scarlet jade in his hand, thinking that he had done well in harvesting the crop. A little earlier, a wounded and crying little demon offered the boy a magical weapon, and he agreed. The hero placed the stone in his robe and thought that with the purple demon's weapon, he could now relax. Well, there are still 2 days before the competition. I need to get some good rest. Meanwhile, somewhere far away in the thicket of the forest, in one of the caves, 2 voices were heard. A boy in the robes of a swordsman clan looked into a purple mirror, in which an unknown person asked what his chances of winning were. The monk replied that with the secret treasure that the owner had given him, he would be among the top 5. Excellent, the dark figure replied. Thanks to you, I will be able to return the blood sphere. I owe you my life, the boy shouted. You saved me. For you, I will go through fire and water. The figure replied that the boy had a good heart, and when he received permission to participate in the great gathering, he would take him away from the swordsman clan. The man raised his head, and we saw his green eyes. He told the master that he would not let him down and would complete the mission no matter what. The stranger in the mirror laughed evilly, and then the connection was broken. 2 days later, the monks were gathering at the main peak of the swordsman clan. Reynold began his ceremonial speech. We have gathered the disciples that the Sword Clan has accepted into its ranks over the past few years. This competition is not only a test of your ascension over the past years, but also the selection of the clan's most worthy disciple. Unlike previous years, talismans, elixirs, spiritual formations, and other items can be used during the fight. You will only need to defeat your opponent and get the highest score to move on. But no matter what, you must not injure your opponents without reason. I, along with other clan masters, will observe your fights to prevent students from being injured. Let the competition begin, Reynold concluded his speech with such solemn words and used his power. Hundreds of small stars appeared in the air like a whirlwind. From these stars, tablets with inscriptions were formed. Then all these tablets rushed into the hands of each applicant. Reynold explained that this jade tablet in the hands of the students would show the number of their opponents. If the jade tablet lights up in your hands, it means it's time to enter the arena and take part in the duel. The first round featured Langson Hall's Zhang Ting versus Blue Moon Hall's Bai Zhang. Frank asked Master Kevin what he thought of the newcomers, and the man replied that out of all of them, there were 1 or 2 outstanding people. Uther intervened in the conversation, saying that with the spiritual energy that these students possessed, one fight will take no more time than it takes to make a cup of tea. The battle began in the arena. The masters watching the fight understood what Master Uther meant. This meant that they would know the results of the competition by the end of the day. And so it happened. Closer to the evening, there were almost no contenders left, and the head of the clan announced the start of the next fight. In the final round, the inner disciples will be fighting between Steve and Carl from the Blue Moon. Alan, who arrived closer to the evening, was surprised that almost all the fighting had already ended. He was also happy to see his younger brother Steve, because the boy was able to reach the final. The fight began. Carl attacked Steve with a powerful blow of the sword, but the guy managed to block the attack. The opponent was not an easy one. This Carl from the Blue Moon Hall was at the 5th level of the Immortal Palace limit. But Alan's younger brother did not give up and continued to fight. Although his opponent is a stage higher than him, Steve's sword technique is excellent. He can compare with a true student and apparently has already mastered the subtlety of the sword. Alan taught him only a couple of tricks, but he was able to master them all and improve his skills. He definitely has talent, and if he tries hard enough, Master Mark will most likely take him on as an apprentice. Steve directed his blue aura at the enemy, but he was able to deftly reflect it. Carl suggested to Steve that they stop trying to wear each other down and find out who would win this fight here and now. A little tired, Steve agreed with his opponent. He wanted to suggest this too. Carl took out a piece of paper and suddenly blue energy began to appear from it. The audience recognized this talisman. It allows you to burn your own spiritual energy and spiritual knowledge for a short period of time to experience your own strength to the fullest. Elder brother Carl wanted to use a 4th level talisman. He certainly doesn't skimp on money. Steve also did not stand aside and swallowed a small pill. It was an explosive energy pill. Although this pill was only a 3rd level one, considering its effect, it was completely equal to the talisman that Carl used. Carl used the Moon Spirit Sword, Moon Bending, and warned Steve to prepare for his attack. The guy also used one of his most powerful attacks, the Wind Spirit Sword, the Silver Dragon. An explosion thundered. Both powerful forces met in a duel. Everything must be decided with one blow. The smoke from the blow began to clear. One of the contenders was on his knee, which meant we had a winner. When the smoke cleared and the audience saw Steve, the guy realized that he had lost. Carl told the guy that he was better only in spiritual energy, and not by much. If his younger brother had been at the same stage of ascension as he was, Carl would undoubtedly have lost. Hearing the words of support, Steve was glad. He mentally thanked Alan for the lessons, because if not for him, the guy would never have reached such a level of mastery in wielding a sword. The referee declared the match over, and Carl from the Blue Moon Hall was declared the winner. Reynold also appreciated the 2 disciples. One had a good spirit and the other had great talent. Both had the potential to become true disciples. The clan leader asked Selena if he could disturb her, and the girl replied that it was her duty to use her ability. A pink aura enveloped the boys, and they felt a surge of strength. Their wounds healed, and their spiritual energy was restored. The judge announced that Carl had reached the 1st place among all the inner disciples. According to the rules, you have the opportunity to choose a true disciple to fight with. If you can win, you will replace his place among the true disciples. Carl didn't think long and named the student he was choosing. It would be Alan from the Luyan Hall. The spectators whispered, "Elder brother Alan is a true disciple, but the weakest of them all. His ascension is only at the 6th level of the Immortal Palace limit, so it can safely be said that he is the weakest true disciple in the history of the Sword Clan." Alan landed in the arena. Carl asked his brother for help, and the boy agreed. Suddenly, Steve turned to Carl and asked him to be careful. The man didn't understand what his younger brother meant, but for some reason his words gave him a bad feeling. The judge announced the start of the duel between the 2 monks. Carl turned to Alan and said that he had first heard about him a long time ago. Alan, hearing these words, thought it was praise and replied that he was very flattered. But Carl did not want to praise him. To be honest, he was terribly disappointed in the behavior of a true student. He, along with other inner disciples, devoted all their strength to the ascent to become a true disciple. They exhausted themselves with training every day and did not think about rest for even a minute. Listening to the monk's story, Alan already guessed what he wanted to tell him. Carl started shouting that, unlike them, Alan was a true student who worked from 9 to 5 and never took climbing seriously. Even outside of training, you spend a lot of time just messing around, sleeping, and not even thinking about the way of the sword. Your lazy actions have no place in the Sword Clan. I will destroy you and take your place among the true disciples. Alan summoned dozens of red symbols and replied that he didn't think his 9 to 5 schedule would be the source of anyone's hatred. Carl released his spiritual energy, a blue aura surrounded him, and the monk rushed into battle. Alan chuckled as he saw his brother's attack and suddenly summoned a scarlet dome for everyone to see. The blue energy of the sword struck Alan's barrier. But to Carl's surprise, the barrier did not allow his spiritual energy to pass through. There was not a scratch on it. The spectators couldn't believe their eyes. Alan was completely fine and didn't receive a single drop of damage. Kevin was indignant. For Alan, this all seemed like some kind of joke. The disciples of the Sword Clan follow the path of the blade and never retreat. The path of the blade is inevitably sprinkled with blood. Look at this guy. He's hiding behind a talisman. Is this how a rising disciple should behave? He's a disgrace to the Sword Clan. Does Master Kevin really think that a disciple of the Sword Clan can only walk the path of bloodshed and should not have the slightest sense of self-preservation? If everyone were as impulsive as you, Uther said, the clan would have ceased to exist long ago. Kevin was outraged to hear such a remark. He asked Uther what he meant by that. Enough, this intra-clan competition was created for the upcoming Great Gathering, where there are no rules. Alan has his reasons for behaving this way, Reynolds shouted. As long as he is going to win, there is no problem. On the battlefield, Alan also stood under the protection of the dome and the inner disciple. Carl was furious that Alan, although a true disciple, still hid behind the talisman when fighting him, the inner disciple. "And how are you any different from a turtle?" the dwarf shouted and rushed to attack the enemy. The boy's sword seemed to begin to break through the barrier, but suddenly Alan grabbed it with 2 fingers, stopping it with ease. Carl froze in place. He couldn't understand what had happened. Alan, holding the sword, said that if the monk was so eager to fight him, then he would give him a chance. The spectators were slightly glad that they would finally start fighting, otherwise they had already begun to fall asleep. Steve, meanwhile, mentally said goodbye to his brother Carl. He was glad to meet him. Carl grinned. Finally, his older brother began to show his strength. Folding his hands in a gesture of reconciliation, Carl apologized for what he said earlier, hoping it had not offended the true disciple too much. Alan replied that he understood that it was said in the heat of the moment, and of course, it wouldn't hurt him. Carl ran his fingers along his blade, and dozens of blades created by spiritual energy appeared in the air. The boy asked his older brother to attack. Alan smiled, and a new talisman appeared in his hand, pouring spiritual energy into it. This talisman began to sparkle. The spectators were surprised and wondered what kind of talisman this was. They had never seen anything like it before. The scarlet spark summoned hundreds of fireballs, which were under Alan's control. It was incredible that just one talisman could release so much spiritual energy. Carl did not wait long and attacked the fireballs with his blades. But suddenly his blue spiritual energy dissipated, and the balls still remained on the battlefield. Carl couldn't believe his eyes. There were still more than half of the balls left. It was simply impossible. Alan pointed at his opponent, and instantly fireballs rushed towards him. In response to this attack, Carl shouted that now he would show all his power. He formed the appropriate sign with his fingers. His hand became covered in a scarlet aura, and at that very moment, blood began to flow from the boy's mouth and landed on his blade. It was one of the secret techniques. His spiritual energy turned red, and the guy prepared to receive the attack. 2 powerful forces clashed with each other. But despite the powerful energy summoned, Carl was unable to hold back the onslaught of fire. A loud explosion was heard on the battlefield, and a naked man flew out of the epicenter. Carl lay on the ground, his clothes gone, his body burned, and his hair sticking up like popcorn. The girls watching the fight squealed in embarrassment and closed their eyes so as not to look at the naked monk. "I told you it would be like this, but you didn't listen," Steve said after the running Carl. One of the students who took 3rd place was horrified because he also initially wanted to choose Alan's brother as an opponent. The smoke from the fire cleared, and the judge announced that they had a winner, the true disciple Alan. The hero smiled and said that he had apparently overdone it and hoped that he had not caused psychological trauma to anyone present. Alan was able to win without using his power. Everything went exactly according to plan. Next up should be Steve, who must also choose his opponent. Steve ran closer to the arena and shouted to his older brother that this fight was absolutely amazing. Alan put his hand on the enthusiastic boy's shoulder and told him to keep working. Inspired, Steve accepted his mentor's instructions and entered the arena with his sword ready. He chose his opponent. It was his elder brother Lin. Lin was surprised that he was chosen, since he was ranked 3rd among all the true disciples. The guy walked into the arena, and the fighters greeted each other. Suddenly, Alan was called by his teacher and asked to come over for a second. The hero did not keep the elders waiting and immediately headed to the terrace. Landing near the elders, he graciously greeted all the masters. But in response, he heard only silence. It was clear that they were not very friendly. Uther got straight to the point and asked his student where he got the talisman. Previously, I inherited this family treasure from my ancestors in the secret realm, and thus learned about this 100 Hell Dragons talisman. The power this talisman can release is directly related to the spiritual energy of the student. In fact, he obtained it by making a deal with that purple demon and giving him some of his spiritual energy in exchange. When this talisman is activated, its power will be comparable to attacking someone on the 4th level of the Purple Palace. I just need to use these spiritual talismans during the fight, and I will be able to win 2 matches without lifting a finger and get into the top 20. So Alan will not only question his own powers, but also complete the task of the teacher to whom he showed his family treasure. Suddenly, the guy was called by his name, Kevin, who was clearly unhappy with him. The hero turned to the master and asked what he wanted to tell him. As a disciple of the Sword Clan, you know how to wield a sword well, but you chose talismans instead. Isn't this the easiest way to win without fighting? What does winning without a fight mean? Alan asked. Since the competition between clans doesn't prohibit the use of talismans, that means my tactics are within the rules. Or maybe Master Kevin doesn't agree with the rules set by the clan leader. Kevin replied that he was simply curious to see how far Alan could go with his scam, at which point their conversation was interrupted by the clan leader. Alan, since you have received the talisman from the Secret Kingdom, we will not torment you with questions anymore, said Reynold. You can go. We wish you good luck in the upcoming competitions. The hero bowed his head and thanked the chief for his parting words and said that he would leave immediately. In his thoughts, the boy was glad that the chief had helped him out. Next time he would give him more bags of tea. A few minutes later, the competition Steve was participating in ended, and unfortunately, the guy lost. Even though the student lost, Alan knew that he had good skills and that he would not be long before being initiated into a true student. The competition of inner disciples has come to an end, the judge announced. Now the duels among true disciples will begin. The students from Grid A were announced, and Alan was in Grid B. The boy guessed that his turn would not come even for an hour and a half. So he decided to rest a bit by levitating in the air. After a few fights, the referee announced a new fight. It was a duel between Hannah from the Hall of the Hidden Mirror and the girl from the Hall of the Blue Moon. The guys who were in the audience were happy that there would finally be a fight between the strongest student, Hannah, who, moreover, was liked by many, not only for her hard work. Alan heard the boys chanting the student's name. Apparently, Hannah really was very popular. But many people also shouted the name of her rival. There are rumors that the younger sister Alice is very beautiful, and many people are discussing her. Apparently, all these guys are so excited because they want to see a fight between 2 beauties. The first girl, embraced by purple petals, appeared on the battlefield. It was Alice from the Blue Moon Hall. She was at the 4th level of the Purple Palace and ranked 6th on the Divine Leaderboard. Next came little sister Hannah, the 5th level of the Purple Palace and 1st place on the Divine Honor Board. Hannah's gaze was stern. Alan immediately noticed that the purpose of the elder sister's sword was stronger and her ascension had increased. The masters also noticed this, but Alice is not weak either. Her Blue Moon sword technique includes magical and power techniques, mysterious and terrifying. Selena asked the leader what he thought the outcome of the duel would be. Reynold replied that both contenders were the strongest among their peers, but in Hannah's ascent to a higher level than Alice, I think everything will become known before the incense has even burned out. The referee announced the start of the fight. Alice said that a year had passed since her and Hannah's last fight. Last time they exchanged 133 blows, and Alice missed only 1. Since then, she persistently practiced climbing. Her strength is now not what it was before. Alice hoped that today Hannah would find out how much her sword technique had improved, after which she summoned the Shadow Step technique. Meanwhile, Hannah gripped her sword tightly, concentrating her power. For only a split second, the girl pulled her sword from its sheath, which illuminated the battlefield with its bright light. Then the girl turned around and, to the surprise of the spectators, began to leave the arena. Behind the student, in a split second, hundreds of strikes from the blue blade cutting through the phantoms appeared. Alice's blade fell to the ground, her illusion dissipated, and the girl was forced to admit defeat. She looked at her shaking hands and couldn't believe that she had lost so quickly. Hannah turned around and told the girl that she only won because Alice let her. The audience did not understand what had happened, why the older sister Alice had so quickly admitted defeat. One of the observers asked Zhao's elder brother if he had seen this attack. The red-haired man replied that one blow had immediately destroyed all illusions, and that Hannah's younger sister's swordsmanship had improved again. Furthermore, little sister Hannah came into contact with little sister Alice's sword 10 times in such a short time, causing her spiritual energy to go in a different direction and weakening her grip. Bill, who was ranked 3rd on the heavenly leaderboard, said that it was mostly because the sword fell from sister Alice's hands, and she admitted defeat. The top disciple of the Zhao clan, the second place on the heavenly table, said that to be precise, they clashed around 20 or 30 times. He was unable to count the exact number. Alan knew that, not counting the blow that dispelled the illusion, there were another 23 blows that dispelled the spiritual energy contained in Alice's sword. It's no wonder she's the best among the true students. I just gave her a couple of tips, and she was able to develop them into such a wonderful fighting technique. It's amazing. Just look at the faces of the masters and elders. They are simply delighted with what they see. Frank jumped up from his chair and said that it was a beginner's sword technique. There's no mistaking it. It was definitely her. How old is Hannah? I think she's been climbing since she was 20. With such talent, the girl will become an invincible swordswoman in the future. The so-called beginner's path refers to the sword technique, one of the 3,000 different paths. In the whole world, there are only 10,000 cultivators of the 9th level of the Purple Palace. But among all those who can understand the path, analyze it, and ascend to the truth, it is extremely rare. Countless cultivators have tried to overstep their bounds, going to dangerous places just to have a glimmer of understanding of the path. Chief, even if you search the entire world, it would be difficult to find a disciple as talented as you. With such a talented student, the clan will become stronger and stronger, Reynolds replied. By the end of this competition, I will personally find Hannah and ask her in detail about her training. The fighting between the students continued, and as the evening approached, Alan became bored. The sun had already begun to set, which meant that his working time was almost over. The judge invited the next fighters into the arena, student number 23, Shan from Liu Yun Hall and Alan from Liu Yun Hall. Looking at the brochure for the upcoming fight, one of the students was horrified, remembering that same guy. The first to arrive in the arena was Shan, a massive dark-skinned man who was clearly eager to get started. Shan from Liu Yun Hall ranked 13th on the heavenly table and had a second-level Purple Palace. I would never have thought that in my very first fight I would come across an older brother from my own gym who was also in 13th place among the students. But nothing could be done. Alan arrived at the arena. The referee announced the start of the fight and a barrier formed around Alan. Shan, seeing the barrier, assumed that the talisman had already been restored. Alan replied that one could say that. Shan said that as soon as he entered the Liu Yun Hall, he became more animated and wanted to become number 1 in the Sword Clan. I had high expectations of my brothers, believing that everyone in Liu Yun Hall was working hard to climb and not allowing themselves to rest. But you are a true disciple of the Liu Yun Hall, and not only do you not work at all, but your laziness also infects the entire hall. What kind of high expectations for children's speech is he making? Alan thought. Why does it seem like he is even more serious than our teacher? Elder brother Shan, the hero replied, I respect your opinion, but you can't force it on me. Working 9 to 5 is what I live for, and it's different from being lazy. You have to understand that there are many important and interesting things in life besides climbing and working. Alan remembered that he had to pay a high price to learn this firsthand, and he hoped that Shan would be able to understand this too someday. Even now you're looking for excuses, Shan shouted. You don't even use a sword in battle, but shift all the work onto trinkets. Today I will break your talisman and make you understand that the Sword Clan lives by the sword and follows its path. The way of swordsmanship is the ultimate goal for every student, including me. After these words, the spectators heard a loud impact of ice shards hitting Alan's barrier. The spectators were shocked to see such a powerful strike, its power comparable to the 5th level of the Purple Palace. It looks like Alan will soon be carried away on a stretcher. He is still only at the limit of the Palace of the Immortals. He is lucky that he lasted so long. The referee was ready to announce the end of the fight because Alan was encased in ice, but suddenly the ice cracked and a sly smile from underneath appeared. As expected of senior brother Shan, the strength of your strike exceeded all my expectations. Steve, along with other spectators, were surprised to see Alan escape from the trap. Shan was also surprised because he put all his strength into this blow, but it only hit the talisman and did not injure it at all. Your protective talisman was stronger than I expected, Shan replied, but now it's broken. Will you face me or admit defeat? Alan replied that he wanted to admit defeat, and at that moment various talismans appeared from his sleeve. But unfortunately, he simply cannot lose this fight, and that is why he uses all these talismans. Shan grinned. Since he could break one of Alan's talismans, he could break the others as well. The hero said that destroying these talismans would not be as easy as the student thought. After all, the talisman he broke was a weakened version, so the hero advised Shan to surrender. After all, this is the full version of the barrier. At that very second, a huge blue barrier formed around the guy. Seeing such a terrifying power, Shan froze in place. Looking at his older brother with a stern look, Alan asked him to attack. Is this some kind of joke? The audience wondered in confusion. Where did this guy get so many talismans? Sean bared his teeth in anger, and the man jumped up and summoned ice fragments. Ice fragments crashed into the barrier, but this time they were unable to do anything. Thousands of talismans reliably protected Alan from any attack. The spectators began to whisper. Shan had just used up all his strength. Breaking a shield made of so many talismans would be difficult. How powerful would an attack have to be to break through it? Frank, watching the fight, was surprised that the guy used all these talismans so suddenly. Could he really control them using only his spiritual power when he was at the Immortal Palace limit stage? He must have used some kind of medicine or treasure to increase his spiritual energy, Kevin guessed. Meanwhile, Reynold was amazed that he would never have thought that Alan would be able to find a way to shirk work right at the interclan competition. Uther analyzed the fight. From the very beginning, Alan used the standard shield talisman and deliberately did not show the full rune, which forced Shan to use all his strength to attack. And then he revealed the full set of runes when the enemy had already spent a lot of spiritual energy, and there would be no need to worry if he broke through the shield again. Could it be that Alan had thought all this through in advance? This is my student's first time fighting at this level, only because of our agreement, and as a teacher I am pleased with his result. But still, both of these guys were Uther's students. Therefore, the master would not like to see either one of his students lose. Sean continued to attack the barrier, but each time it recovered, after another attack, he fell to his knees without strength. Overwhelmed with anger, he punched the ground. Even though he used all his spiritual energy, he still couldn't destroy the shield. Therefore, the man decided to admit his defeat. There was no point in continuing the fight. The referee declared the end of the fight. Alan won this competition. The hero smiled and bowed before his older brother, saying that he won only because he allowed him to win. Shan didn't answer, but simply turned around and began to leave the arena. Turning around, he said that a third-level Purple Palace cultivator could break Alan's shield with just a little concentration. The same method won't work with other students. The guy won't always be able to pull off this trick. But Shan lost, but Alan wouldn't get far if he relied only on the shield. The man hoped that the guy had more tricks up his sleeve to raise the rank of Lu Yun Hall. The hero was surprised by such words and thanked his older brother for his comments. Although senior brother Shan's words were rude, his intentions were good, but I don't care about rank. I just want to live an ordinary life in this world. Alan turned and began to walk down the arena, hearing the spectators around him condemning him, saying that this fight was too shameful. Everyone said that he didn't even draw his blade. He was unworthy of being considered a true disciple. In principle, the hero expected such a reaction. He moved away from the arena and returned to his favorite activity, relaxing by the tree. Hannah, who was watching the fight, could not understand how her older brother Alan came to use talismans. Suddenly someone called the girl's name and she turned around. It was a true student of the Hidden Mirror Hall named Jennifer, who asked Hannah if she also thought that this fight was a little shameful. Hannah got angry when she heard this, and asked how her little sister could even say such a thing. The head of the department has already announced the rules for this competition. There are no restrictions. Victory is the most important thing. So tell me what's shameful about the fact that Brother Alan won this fight thanks to his talent. The poor girl didn't know what to answer. She just wanted to find a topic for conversation. Somehow Sister Hannah reacted too sharply to her words. Jennifer replied that Alan was a disciple of the Sword Clan, and yet he had not used a single blade technique, which was too much. And who said that a disciple of the Sword Clan must necessarily follow the way of the sword? According to my knowledge, the second elder ascended to the truth through the way of the wind. There's a reason why Brother Alan doesn't use his sword. The thing is, he doesn't need a sword to defeat his opponents, Hannah said enthusiastically. The girl stood and flew in the clouds with admiration. Jennifer did not understand what was happening to Hannah. It was strange because, as the first student of the clan, she always worked hard and didn't even look at the lazy students. But as soon as Alan, the laziest disciple of the clan, appeared, she suddenly became his protector. Today, something is definitely wrong with her. Suddenly, the girl's conversation was interrupted by the judge's cry, who shouted at the monk, asking how he could be so cruel. Alan also heard the scream and also felt a strange energy. One of the students was lying on the platform. He was dead, and a sword was stuck into his body. A monk, shrouded in purple lightning, hovered above the man's body. He was a true disciple of the Lu Yun Hall named Urui. He was ranked 33rd on the heavenly leaderboard. Alan became alarmed when he saw the death of one of the monks. Although the intra-clan competition is being held without any restrictions this time, it does have several strict rules, one of which is a ban on intentional injury. "Uri, what have you done?" the judge shouted and concentrated his spiritual power. The energy slightly attacked the guy, and he replied that he should ask the elders what he did. After all, once used, his technique cannot be cancelled, which is why he lost control and killed that student. If it weren't for the rules, he wouldn't have used that technique. Mark was surprised that one blow from this guy could release the power of the 5th level of the Purple Palace. Strange that he had never heard of the existence of such a disciple in Master Uther's hall. Uther told about this boy. This child's name is Urui. A year ago he left the hall in search of a secret kingdom. It was only 2 weeks ago that he passed through it and returned to the clan. I didn't think that his ascension level from the 2nd level of the Purple Palace would advance to the 5th. Could it be that he received some powerful treasure in the secret kingdom? Reynolds found out what kind of technique the guy was using. He was using a secret technique from ancient times called explosive spirit mastery. It consists of compressing all the spiritual energy of the body into one point and then releasing it. This technique is very powerful, but it is also very difficult to control because it uses all the strength in the human body. Entering the arena, the clan leader stated that, apparently, this student killed the monk unintentionally. He ordered the rest of the disciples to prepare everything necessary for the burial of the body and also to clear the arena. This monk was not strong enough. He entered into battle and was mercilessly killed by Urui. The way of the sword is inextricably linked with death. I ask all students to be careful. If your strength is not enough to fight, it is better to admit defeat and stay alive. The girls also arrived at the arena, and Jessica remembered that in the previous competition, there were also those who forced themselves to participate even though their spiritual energy was weak, or fought to the death without thinking about the value of their lives. Hannah confirmed her words, but last time the leader and elders could have prevented the duel from ending fatally. The best student had no idea that this time everything would be different, and that anything would happen at all. Uri looked with a mad gaze at the spectators who followed him with their eyes as he left the arena, dragging his bloody sword behind him. A villainous smile appeared on the student's face, and it seemed as if a dark aura surrounded him. Alan thought he was imagining things, but he seemed to sense demonic energy emanating from this guy. The incident put enormous pressure on the remaining true disciples in the following matches, and although everyone used their best techniques, they still held back. Reynolds announced that half of the 55 true students had been eliminated, 28 had made it to the second round, and the remaining ones would now receive plaques for the next round of the competition. He created the blue tablets again, and in an instant, they were in the hands of the students. Alan understood that if he won this round, he would get into the top 20. Once that happens, my agreement with the teacher will be fulfilled. I will just have to naturally lose in the third round of the competition and leave. The second round of the competition was about to begin, and the first fight was to be between Urui from the Liuyun Hall and Xiao from the Nebula Hall. Spectators were wondering how this fight would end. Some were betting on Xiao, as he was in first place in the Nebula Hall, but some thought that Urui would win, as rumor had it that he was now at level 5 of the Purple Palace. Xiao, who was at the 5th level of the Purple Palace and ranked 5th on the Divine Leaderboard, said that he didn't even know about Urui until today, or rather, he didn't take anyone seriously except the top 10 disciples of the clan. That's why Xiao allowed the guy to attack first, since he was a newbie. All the girls in the audience squealed with delight, wishing their older brother good luck. This guy didn't repeat a single pose before entering the arena, Alan thought. Confidence is certainly good, but if you can't cope with it, you'll get hit right in the face. The fight began. Urui laughed when he heard Xiao's words and advised his older brother to be careful. Purple devilish energy rushed towards Xiao. The attack was quite fast. The top student summoned a pink dome, and Uruya's attacks crashed into it. The purple blade pierced the dome, but Xiao blocked it with his sword. Suddenly, blood started pouring out of Xiao's mouth. The spectators were scared. His brother was injured. It was impossible for Urui's attack to be so powerful. Xiao fought off his opponent's multiple sword attacks, but he continued to advance. The best student told his opponent that he had underestimated him, while Urui couldn't believe that the guy was still standing. Alan chuckled. This Xiao is smarter than I thought. He used sarcasm and self-confidence as a defense, although in fact he was teasing Urui and provoking him to strike first, because he didn't say that he wouldn't block his attack. He made all the preparations and used the Misty Hall sword technique to release spiritual energy into the sky and create a shield, which just allowed him to block a large number of attacks. Shi smiled. He told his opponent that this blow was not bad, but he figured out what its essence was. At that very moment, the boy released his spiritual energy and summoned the sword technique of the Misty Hall. This technique was called the Sea of Stars, and it instantly fell upon the enemy. The spectators watching the spectacle thought that the fight was over. But it wasn't that simple. In a split second, Alan saw that Uruya's eyes had taken on a demonic appearance. At that moment, he realized that the winner had been determined, as a rain of dark spiritual energy fell onto the arena. Xiao couldn't understand how Urui was able to attack him even after he used his signature move. Opening his eyes, the swordsman saw a huge sword made of spiritual energy flying towards him. He summoned a shield that resembled a pink lotus flower, but Urui knew it was still useless. To Xiao's surprise, the purple energy pierced his shield and knocked his sword out of his hands. At this moment, Xiao realized that this guy had actually hidden his true strength.